You don't have a ticket. Someone like you could never understand music. Thanks to my father-in-law and mother-in-law, I found myself at a classical concert venue, but my ticket had mysteriously disappeared. How dare someone like you try to mingle with us? Go home. I was clearly being discriminated against, but the person who stepped up to help me was my mother-in-law. Little did my sister-in-law know, she was about to face her own downfall. My name is Betty. I fell in love with music at a young age. Being surrounded by the music I loved was always a joy, but due to my shy and reserved personality, I never really played with others. I just played alone with toy instruments. We weren't a wealthy family, so taking music lessons was out of the question. In elementary school, I eagerly joined the wind ensemble and continued through high school. However, whenever we had to play as a group, I was always the one holding everyone back. This experience left me with a deep-seated trauma, making me uncomfortable in group settings, even beyond music. I found solace in playing an instrument alone, often retreating to a corner of the music room. My music teacher noticed this and introduced me to a well-known musician who recognized my rare talent. Unfortunately, my parents never understood or supported my passion, as we weren't well off. I often thought that with proper training, I might feel comfortable playing in a group. However, due to our financial situation, that was never an option. Eventually, I gave up on pursuing music professionally and settled for enjoying it as a hobby. When I received my first paycheck as an adult, I went to my first ever classical concert. I was a big fan of a particular family of musicians whom I deeply admired. The tickets were expensive, even for the worst seats, but I decided to go for it, thinking it might be my only chance. I had no regrets. The experience was worth far more than the price of the ticket, and I left feeling deeply satisfied. I'd love to go again if the opportunity arises, but I can't afford to buy expensive tickets regularly. I contribute a portion of my salary to my family and need to save for my wedding as well. Regarding marriage, I'm just waiting to meet someone who feels right. After working for 3 years, my parents have started hinting that I should think about my future. In the past, people usually married in their late 20s to early 30s. My mom married my dad around that time too. Nowadays, personal choice is highly valued. My parents understand this and don't nag much, but their lack of pressure makes me feel like I need to hurry up and get married. Even after getting a job, I'm still shy and introverted. I've been invited to group dates by female coworkers but never really talked to anyone. Just considering going on a group date is growth for me, so I decided to start with online conversations through a dating app. I met a guy who loves music and we hit it off online. After exchanging messages for a while, he asked to meet up and I agreed. When we met, I was stunned to realize he was one of the members of a famous musical family I admired. People might wonder why I didn't recognize him from his profile picture, but who would ever think it was actually them? His name was common enough not to raise suspicion. I figured if he knew I was a fan, he might turn me down, so I kept it a secret at first. Eventually, I opened up about my shyness and discomfort in large groups. He said, "I feel the same way." The more we talked, the more we connected, and we decided to get married. When I finally told him I was a fan, he said he was honored and his smile was radiant. Things were progressing smoothly, and we set a date to meet his parents. His family members were usually busy touring, but there happened to be one day when they were all home. Nervously, I entered his house and waited for his parents. His sister-in-law entertained me in the meantime. She said, "As you might know, we're a musical family. If you can't play at least the violin, you're not really part of the family, you know." I was in trouble. I had never touched a violin in my life, let alone played one. The school band club didn't have room for violins. Just then, his parents stepped in and said, if she has musical skills, any instrument will do. But his sister-in-law insisted on the violin. Then he said, "Mom, don't we have a practice violin? Can we borrow it?" And added, "Please give Betty and me some time for a quick lesson." His mother agreed. "Why not? It'll be interesting to see what you can do in about an hour with a string instrument, especially a violin." I wasn't confident I could make a sound in just an hour. "But trust me, Betty, you'll be fine," he said. I took his word for it and asked my mother-in-law if she'd lend me her violin. He had a practice room, and we spent an hour there. It was my first time with a violin one-on-one. Honestly, I was terrible, but "Twinkle Twinkle Little Star" is a song I know well, so imagining it was easy. I focused on putting emotion into my playing since my technique was non-existent. "You're doing great, Betty," my mother-in-law said. Just making the sound on the violin is hard. You've come a long way, especially considering it's your first time. You're giving the music the respect it deserves." He also said, "You move me," and gave me a big round of applause. The only one who seemed unimpressed was my sister-in-law. She probably thought I would embarrass myself and never expected me to win over her mom. As a result, I was welcomed into this musical family and officially became a married woman. My relationship with my father-in-law and mother-in-law is good, but a troubling dynamic with my sister-in-law is emerging. She frequently picks on me, makes snide remarks, and harasses me. She's very pushy and always retaliates if I try to stand up for myself, which I struggle to do, making her even more irritated. The harassment has only intensified. When the family was on tour, there were days when my sister-in-law wasn't performing due to the tour's schedule. On those days, it was just my sister-in-law and me at home. Although we had a housekeeper, my sister-in-law insisted that I cook. After tasting my meals, she criticized them as awful and poorly made. Even when she asked me to remake a dish, she would throw it away in front of me, claiming she didn't want to eat it anymore. She would even spill soup intentionally. Additionally, she would step on my back or put her foot on my head. During family dinners, she would often call me to the bathroom for no reason. "When will you learn proper table manners?" she demanded. "I don't want to share a table with someone like you." Although my husband, father-in-law, and mother-in-law believe I'm improving, she keeps saying, "I can't believe you can't even manage that." I don't think I'm as ill-mannered as she claims. Nevertheless, the sadness and frustration from not being acknowledged make me feel disheartened. After she leaves, I retreat to a quiet corner and wipe away my tears. My husband soon finds me and asks, "I was worried when you didn't come back." "Wait, why are you crying? Is she giving you a hard time? Don't hold back. Tell me everything." "What a sweet man," I almost said. But then I heard the joyful laughter from the family gathering and didn't want to disrupt the mood just for my own issues. If I could be patient, maybe it would help maintain the peace. "No, it's not like that. I get along with her," I said. "But you were crying." "I was just so happy to be married and accepted by everyone. I couldn't help but cry," I explained. My husband paused for a moment, then nodded in agreement. "Yeah, you're right." He took my hand and said, "Let's continue with dinner," leading me back to the table. It seemed like we might finally get some downtime from my father-in-law and mother-in-law. They even suggested attending a classical music concert as part of my welcome. Listening to various performers and interpretations from different conductors could be enlightening. They asked which concert I'd like to attend, and I recommended one they had previously enjoyed. They discovered they might be able to get tickets through a connection. However, my sister-in-law insisted on handling the tickets herself, claiming she had some influence with the people involved. On the day of the event, we arrived at the venue, and my sister-in-law went to the staff entrance. After a brief conversation with the staff, she returned with what looked like tickets. She distributed the tickets to everyone, but I didn't receive one. People who are broke wouldn't understand music anyway, right? Excuse me, but you and I are on different levels. Know your place. Now go home. You don't belong here. My husband offered to check if there were any spare tickets available. However, not wanting to escalate the situation or make things uncomfortable for everyone, I decided it was best to leave and began to pull my husband away. "Wait, Betty, you're not the one who needs to leave. It's her who's always mistreating you," said my mother-in-law, who had been quiet until now. "Why me? Listening to music has nothing to do with being rich or poor. People have their own ways of enjoying it. It's not for others to interfere." My mother-in-law scolded my sister-in-law, who had always been cold toward me. "You think I don't know? It's clear something's been going on behind my back." "That's not true." "Really? I find your envious attitude far more impoverished," my mother-in-law retorted. My brother-in-law chimed in, "Aren't you always sleeping through concerts? It might seem like you're oblivious, but it's glaringly obvious," he chuckled. Sure, sister-in-law graduated from a music conservatory and won some awards, but she became complacent and stopped improving. You have to practice your instrument every day, or your skills will deteriorate. If you're going to lecture others on music, maybe you should first focus on improving yourself, my brother-in-law said. My brother-in-law regretted not being able to address his wife's lack of skill and attitude as a musician directly, but he couldn't bear the idea of causing harm to his brother's wife. "You have neither the awareness nor the ambition as a musician. I think it's time for you to leave our family. I'm tired of supporting someone with no promise of growth." It was an opportune moment for my sister-in-law to lash out. "You're one to talk, old lady. Your sense of music is so outdated that I can't even stand it. It sounds like something for the poor, so of course, I'd be thrilled to leave this awful musical family." Her words grew even stronger. She proclaimed she would go solo, make her own fortune, and prove everyone wrong. I thought people like her were incapable of self-reflection, but I didn't expect such intense rage. In the end, she stormed off, throwing a concert ticket to the ground as she left. My mother-in-law picked up the ticket and handed it to me. "Let's go," she said, taking my hand as we walked together. My second experience at a classical concert was deeply moving. Different musicians and conductors brought unique vibes and interpretations to the same piece, making me wonder how the same composition could sound so varied. I discovered new interpretations and learned a great deal. My mother-in-law seemed to notice my enthusiasm. Meanwhile, the tension between my brother-in-law and sister-in-law reached a breaking point, and their attempts at reconciliation failed, leading to their eventual divorce. My former sister-in-law hastily organized her solo concert, disregarding advice. Overconfident, she rented a venue with a capacity of 5,000 people, a size rarely filled even by popular classical concerts. Unsurprisingly, ticket sales were poor, and she ended up buying many herself to make the hall appear less empty. Unsold merchandise left her with a warehouse full of stock. Her second solo concert fared no better, attracting only a handful of attendees. Lacking both talent and a likable personality, she faced widespread online criticism. Unable to pay her staff or cover other expenses, she quickly fell into debt. Her street performances were met with harsh comments like, "You're terrible, stop annoying us," and even resulted in water being thrown at her. My mother-in-law suggested that I should receive professional music training given my apparent talent. I was both surprised and delighted by the idea, though I felt it might be a bit late to start learning an instrument. However, it seemed like an opportunity I had thought I had missed was presenting itself once again, and I could hardly believe it. I was told I could choose the instrument, and I'm leaning towards the violin, especially since my husband has been helping me with it. My mother-in-law found an outstanding instructor renowned for nurturing many skilled violinists. I even began accompanying the family on their concert tours and assisting behind the scenes. Every day feels blissful as I immerse myself in music and notice my improvement. My current dream is to perform a solo with my husband accompanying me on the piano.
Aita by Emily, aged 35, and for the past decade, I've dedicated myself to homemaking. My spouse, Michael, a doctor, and I have been leading a reasonably content life despite not having children. However, an unexpected event disrupted our 10-year marital journey. One evening, as Michael arrived home late, he dropped a bombshell. "This is the end for us, Emily," he declared abruptly. Bewildered, I questioned him. "What do you mean by the end? What's suddenly happening?" "I decided to marry my mistress, so we're getting divorced today," he declared nonchalantly. "Marry your mistress? What are you talking about? I've made up my mind I'm leaving you and marrying her. Besides, we didn't marry for love, so you probably don't care, right?" Michael explained callously. Indeed, ours wasn't a love match. Michael's parents had orchestrated our union, and we barely knew each other before tying the knot hastily. The only commonality we shared was our original last name, a coincidence that seemed like fate during the rush of surrounding weddings. As we navigated through our wedding and marriage, I never fathomed that we would part ways after a decade. Despite lacking the foundation of a love marriage, we had lived together for 10 years. Now Michael wanted to marry someone else. It wasn't a love marriage, but we've lived together for 10 years, and now you suddenly want to marry your mistress. When did you start betraying me? I confronted him, grappling with the revelation. It's not betrayal. I met her about a year ago. She's a nurse who joined our hospital. She's charming, unlike you, always caring for me. And it's natural that I was drawn to her, Michael explained, justifying his decision. Natural. Are you serious? I responded, stunned by his revelation. Yes, I've always been serious. These 10 years living with you have been true hell. I was honestly sick and tired of supporting such a boring woman. But that ends today, he asserted coldly. How can you talk like that? It's the truth. You're a homemaker who produces nothing, while she's an active nurse. Ask any man in the country. They'd all choose her over you. Do you think a high-achieving doctor like me needs someone like you? Michael continued, his words cutting through me. After a brief pause, I mustered the strength to respond, "Fine, let's divorce." I never thought I'd be married to someone who could say such things so calmly. "We can discuss alimony and property division later with a lawyer. I'll sign the divorce papers and send them later. Until then, I'll go back to my parents' house." However, Michael interrupted, revealing a shocking truth. "No need for discussions. We don't even need a divorce paper." Perplexed, I questioned him. "What do you mean? We can't separate without it. If we don't divorce, you can't remarry." "You're so naive. It's pathetic. The truth is, I never submitted our marriage registration. We're not a married couple, just cohabitants. So there's no divorce, no alimony, no property division. You thought you'd get my money in the divorce, but you won't get a penny," Michael disclosed. Shocked by this revelation, I confronted him. "Not submitted? Wait, are you joking? We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. It's impossible that you didn't submit it." "Normally, yes. That's why I made that rule at the beginning. If you went to the office, everything would be ruined. When we got married, we made some rules. I, as a homemaker, would handle all the household chores. I was on an allowance, and part-time work was prohibited. Michael would handle all governmental and official matters," I recounted. "Why would you do such a thing?" I questioned. "Because I was about to be forced into a marriage with someone I didn't love. It's not like I was going to submit it easily. I was saving marriage for someone I was destined to be with," Michael explained. "Why didn't you refuse the marriage proposal in the first place?" I demanded. "I couldn't refuse. My parents are stubborn and wouldn't listen. I wanted a housekeeper. I'm a busy doctor and can't often tend to household chores. So, I decided to marry you as a housekeeper. It was a good deal for you too, right? You could eat well and have a roof over your head without working. You seemed desperate to get married too. What, you were probably feeling pressured because your friends were getting married, right? Even though we weren't actually married, you were seen as the woman who married a doctor. This 10-year relationship was a win-win for both of us, and it ends today. You should be grateful for the good times you had. Now you have to live on your own without relying on others," Michael declared, concluding our tumultuous chapter. "I can't believe this. Oh, and one more thing. Don't tell my parents about this. If you do anything unnecessary, you know what will happen to your father, right? My father, who runs a medical equipment sales company, has a contract with the hospital where he works. It was through my marriage to him that this connection was made. If I told my in-laws, he's implying that he'd sever the contract as a threat. In other words, he's warning me not to take any action. It's your fault for being deceived. How pitiful to be thrown out with nothing," he said, laughing. But the one who would be thrown out without knowing anything was actually him. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What's so funny all of a sudden? I can't believe you became a doctor with that kind of knowledge," he questioned. "I knew all along about your mistress and that you didn't submit our marriage registration," I replied calmly. "That's impossible," he insisted. "That's why I've been preparing, waiting for the day you'd bring it up yourself. In fact, I had suspected his infidelity for the past 6 months. But I didn't have enough evidence to confront him. So I hired a private investigator to look into his affair. Ma'am, there are 2 things I need to tell you. The first is that your husband is indeed having an affair. We've got evidence of him entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace. And the second is from their conversations. There's a possibility that you two are not legally married." "Possibility of not being legally married? What does that mean?" I asked, shocked. "I overheard your husband and his mistress at a cafe. He said they didn't need to worry about alimony or property division since they never submitted a marriage registration," the investigator revealed. I can't believe it. We've been living as a married couple for 10 years. I don't know why he didn't submit the marriage registration. That's why he never let me handle any official procedures, I realized. Yeah, that seems to be the case. I can't believe this. How could this happen? I explained. It's rare to hear about not submitting a marriage registration for 10 years, but it's not unheard of. This is too much. Am I just supposed to accept this? If we were never married from the start, there's nothing I can do, I lamented. Not necessarily. What do you mean? The investigator asked. Let's make him pay for deceiving you for 10 years. First, we need to prepare without him noticing, I declared. And so, I began to prepare with the investigator to punish my husband. So what if you knew we were never married from the start? So it doesn't matter what I do with other women. I don't need to take any responsibility, he said, oblivious to the storm that was about to hit him. I pitied myself for not knowing anything. But it seems you were the one truly pitiful. What do you mean? We're considered to be in a common law relationship on paper. So what? You might not know, but you can actually claim alimony and divide property in a common law relationship. What he didn't know was that registering as a de facto marriage would backfire on him. You can make claims in a common law relationship. It's not well known, but yes, you can. Of course, there are some conditions, but looking at your case, it seems you meet them. What are these conditions? A common law relationship is established based on 2 criteria. First, both parties must have the intention to marry. If it's just living together, that's cohabitation. Mutual intent to marry is key. For instance, if you had a wedding ceremony or were recognized as a couple by others, it can be acknowledged. We've had a wedding ceremony, and our parents and friends know us as a couple. Then the first criterion is met. The second is living as if married. This includes sharing household life for over 3 years. You've been living together as a couple for over 10 years, and as a homemaker, you obviously shared the household finances. This is recognized as a marital relationship. So that means if you can provide proof of what we discussed, you can claim alimony and divide property. I'm not an expert in this area, so I'll introduce you to a lawyer. You can work with them to bring him down. After consulting with the lawyer, I was told that I could indeed claim alimony and property division from my husband. So I'm going to demand alimony and property division from you, I informed my husband, who turned pale. His confidence, which had looked down on me just a moment ago, was gone. But even if you can claim alimony and property division, you're just an unemployed woman. Do you plan to rely on your parents after being kicked out? He scoffed. Didn't I say I was preparing? I've already found a job starting next month. I've also got my eye on a new place. Don't worry about me, I responded confidently. What he thought, that a clueless homemaker would be helpless, had backfired. I'll make sure to discuss this with your parents, just so you know. Do you not care what happens to your father if they want to break the contract? He challenged. Let them. Sure, you were the link to the hospital, but the contract continued because of my father and his company's efforts. Whether or not they keep the contract is up to them. Let's see if they'll break a contract just because the doctor's wife of 10 years was a lie. Try saying that to my father and me. We won't be affected if the contract is broken over this. It only shows the depth of their trust. We'll just find another hospital to partner with, I asserted. Saying this, I took out my phone. You're not calling your parents, are you? He questioned. That's exactly what I'm doing. Our parents think we're still married. It's only natural to inform them if this relationship is ending, I stated. To my surprise, my husband began to apologize. Please let me talk to them. Don't call, he pleaded. Why? You know how strict my parents are. If they find out about this, I'm done, he explained. What does that have to do with me? You're asking me not to tell the truth because your parents are strict. Are you kidding? You could have refused the marriage from the start if you didn't intend to marry. After 10 years of a selfish marriage, you're afraid of your parents finding out. I can't accept such a convenient story, I retorted. But I can't accept your story. I'll make sure to tell both your parents and mine, I declared. And so, I called both sets of parents. All 4 were shocked upon hearing my story, and a meeting was promptly arranged at our house. I've heard everything over the phone. Is it true that you pretended to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration? Speak up, you foolish son, my father scolded. It's true. I didn't submit it. Why would you do such a thing? Didn't you think about how Emily would feel? My mother added. I had no choice. No choice, you say? How can you even say that? It's actually your fault, Dad and Mom. I didn't want to get married, yet you started looking for a bride on your own, saying it was time, he explained. I got married because you arranged meetings and tried to force a marriage on me. You're the one who agreed to the marriage, aren't you? I had to agree. If I had refused, you would have made a fuss about it, so I decided to get married. If you were resolved to marry, why didn't you submit the marriage registration? I read about a man on the internet who was in the same situation. He didn't want to marry but had to because of his parents. He lived a married life without submitting the registration, then revealed the truth when he found someone he truly loved. That's appalling. And what happened to that guy in the end, he asked. He's now married to the person he loves and has a real marriage. So I too will marry my girlfriend and have a real marriage. Then my parents, who had been silent until now, spoke up after hearing his reasoning. A real marriage, huh? Sure, you might not have had a love marriage, but do you remember what you said at the wedding? We will never forget to care for each other and build a home full of smiles. What did those words mean to you? What were we shown? We sent our daughter to you hoping for her happiness, but you deceived her for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. Did you build a home full of smiles? Now you're leaving her for another woman. Can someone who acts without a shred of care, even if they change partners, truly have a real marriage? Well, he began, but my father-in-law interrupted. I was happy you married our daughter, not just because you were a doctor. I thought she could build a happy home with someone as sincere as you. But it seems we were mistaken and deceived. And you threatened our daughter. If she told us about this, you'd cut off the contract with our company. Seriously. If you're going to threaten our daughter, we'll cut off the contract ourselves. Be warned, we will tell the truth when asked. Why? If you do that, there will be rumors at the hospital. Well, yes, but that's the result of your own actions. You were the one who threatened us with cutting off the contract. My husband was in complete panic at this unexpected turn of events. Please wait. This is getting out of hand. Let's just talk, he pleaded. At that moment, my father-in-law grabbed him by the collar, furious. Don't mess with us. We didn't raise you to be such a scoundrel. What were you thinking, father? Please stop. By not submitting the marriage registration, you might have thought you were doing yourself a favor. But because of your selfish actions, Emily was strung along for 10 years. What were you thinking, causing such trouble to others? The living room fell silent. My husband, faced with my father-in-law's words, had nothing more to say. Emily and your parents, I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by this idiot, my father-in-law said. No, you parents shouldn't apologize. It's not your fault. However, it's partly our responsibility as parents for letting him act this way. For now, we'll take him home and make sure he doesn't continue his reckless behavior. We'll deal with the aftermath properly. We're very sorry for all this. And with that, my husband was taken away by his parents back to his childhood home. You've been through a lot. For now, you should come back home and rest. We'll think about what to do next later. You don't need to worry about anything right now, my parents said, thinking I was completely exhausted and deceived. They spoke to me with such kindness. Thank you, but I won't go back home yet. I still have things I need to do. I declined their offer and stayed in my own home. What I had to do was prepare for the final settlement with my now ex-husband. Gathering evidence for our common law relationship, I was getting ready to claim alimony and divide our assets. A few weeks later, a meeting with a lawyer was arranged. However, even if I agree to alimony, why should I divide my property? She's been a homemaker for 10 years, never working a day. All the furniture, clothes, food. I paid for everything. Now you're telling me to hand over the money I worked hard for, the furniture I bought. He ranted, unable to accept that his money would be shared with me. Yes, that's correct. The money you earned and the furniture are subject to property division, the lawyer explained. Why does it have to be like that? He protested. Who did the housework? While you were working, who cooked meals with the groceries you bought? That's irrelevant now. No, it's very relevant. A homemaker is entitled to property division because housework and child care have economic value. Speaking as a human, not just a lawyer, do you think housework is something anyone can do, that it's just expected of a homemaker? The reason you could live freely is because of her support. Don't get that wrong. And this situation is a result of your actions, yet you have the audacity to be selfish, the lawyer continued. What'd you say? Never mind. Anyway, she's entitled to half of the assets for property division. That's how it is. Dan, regarding alimony, we intend to claim $100,000 from you. $100,000? Why so much for a relationship that wasn't even a marriage? It's precisely because you weren't married. Normally, alimony claims in common law relationships range from $10,000 to $40,000. However, in your case, you pretended to be married for 10 years and selfishly tried to kick her out when you found someone else. The amount is determined by the severity and duration of your actions. But still, you may think 10 years is just a short time, but it's longer than you realize. During that time, she devoted herself to you, believing you were a married couple. You have no right to complain after betraying her. A perfect rebuttal left him speechless, and he reluctantly agreed to my demands. Then I also sent a notice of claim for alimony to his mistress. I knew who and where she was, thanks to the investigator, as she was a nurse working at the same hospital. The mistress, having heard from him that there was no possibility of alimony or property division, must have been utterly shocked by the contents of the claim. Wait a minute, this isn't what you told me. What you want? She confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. I told you not to talk to me at the hospital. I got this from your wife. You said there wouldn't be any alimony because we weren't married. What's this all about? I later learned that, in a panic after being served with the alimony claim from me, she confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. Okay. Let's talk about this later, not here. There are too many people around. We'll both be in trouble if this turns into a rumor. I don't care about that. I can't pay this kind of alimony. You said it was okay, so you should pay. Pay it for me. I won't pay a penny. You were the one who wanted this relationship. You said I was the only one for you, that you wanted to marry me. Hey, quiet down. Everyone can hear us. Just so you know, I'm not in the wrong here. If you want to make amends with your wife, do it yourself. Tell her I don't owe her a penny, that you'll take care of everything. This exchange led to the revelation of their affair to the entire hospital. It quickly became the talk of the place, and then the final blow was my father's request to the hospital. I apologize, but we would like to terminate our contract at the end of next month. The hospital, aware of the rumors, asked my father, "Excuse me for asking, but is the reason for canceling the contract related to Dr. Michael's affair? It's already become a rumor." Yes, a nurse presumed to be involved caused quite a scene. I never imagined he had been pretending to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. I never expected it to turn out like this. You mean he never submitted the registration? Weren't you aware that he hadn't submitted the marriage registration? All we knew was that he, being married, had an affair. What do you mean he didn't submit the marriage registration? With my father's request, it was revealed that he had been deceiving me for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. This news spread among the other nurses. Dr. Michael deceived his wife for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration, and he had an affair with a nurse. How low? How could he do that? Can someone really not notice for 10 years? Apparently, Emily's maiden name was the same, and he managed all the official paperwork. That's scary. The rumors spread not only among hospital staff, but also to patients, and both Michael and his mistress received cold stares. Unable to endure, they soon resigned from the hospital. as my father told me. Did you manage to get the alimony? Yes, I received payments from both him and his mistress. She refused to pay until the end, claiming she was deceived, but the lawyer made it clear her argument wouldn't hold, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. That's good. What about you, Dad? Did the contract get canceled after all? No, that's off the table. He resigned, and since our company is trusted, the hospital asked us not to cancel the contract. We couldn't cancel it after they asked like that. That's a relief. Then I started a new life in a new place and was living happily. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband contacted me. Is it true you got remarried? I had married a man I met at work, and somehow he had found out. I wondered whose number this was, going through the trouble of changing your number just to contact me. Just answer my question. Yes, I got married. You betrayed me. Betray? We were never legally married, so I didn't think it would matter to you. Right? That's a different matter indeed. Things are different now. We're completely separated, so my marriage has nothing to do with you. Is that why you contacted me? After I said this, he seemed at a loss for words. Then he taunted. Of course, you're still unmarried, since you probably haven't submitted a marriage registration again. You're that kind of woman. But things weren't as he imagined. Unfortunately for you, my husband isn't the kind of person to do such terrible things. He knows all about your story, so to ensure I wouldn't feel anxious, we went to the office together to submit the registration. Sadly for you, things aren't as you thought. I can somewhat understand your wish for me to be unhappy, considering your own misery, but sorry you're happily married. I told him this and hung up the phone. What kind of life he leads now, I don't know. But unless he changes his selfish nature, it's unlikely he'll ever find happiness. I am Emily, aged 35, and for the past decade, I've devoted my life to homemaking. My partner in this journey was Michael, a doctor. Despite our lack of children, we found contentment in our shared existence. However, the tranquility was shattered one day when Michael arrived home late, delivering a proclamation that would mark the end of our 10-year marriage. It's over for us, Emily, he declared. Bewildered, I questioned him about the sudden revelation. Michael, habitually returning late, dropped a bombshell. He had decided to marry his mistress, and divorce was imminent. Shocked, I exclaimed, "Marry your mistress." What are you talking about? Michael asserted his decision, emphasizing that our union lacked the foundation of love. Our marriage was orchestrated by his parents, who deemed me a suitable match. We tied the knot hastily, knowing little about each other beyond sharing a common last name. People might call it fate that we shared the same surname, and in the whirlwind of surrounding marriages, I succumbed to the notion marrying him. Our union, though not built on love, endured for a decade. Little did I anticipate that Michael would abruptly opt for a divorce. I confronted him about the betrayal, demanding to know when he started betraying me. Michael insisted it wasn't betrayal, revealing that he met his mistress, a nurse in our hospital, a year ago. Enthralled by her charm and caring nature, he was drawn to her. The revelation left me incredulous. Despite our marriage's lack of love, I never imagined Michael's callous desire to marry another woman. He demeaned our shared history, expressing disdain for my role as a homemaker. His words cut deep, stating that he found me boring and that living with me for 10 years was hell. I agreed to the divorce, shocked at his callousness. We discussed the legalities later, but Michael dropped another bombshell. He never submitted our marriage registration. We were not legally married. We were merely cohabitants. His elaborate scheme, formed during our initial agreement, ensured that he maintained control over all official matters. As the reality sank in, I realized that the life I thought I had built was nothing more than an illusion. Michael had strategically kept our marriage unregistered to secure financial control. The 10 years we spent together seemed like a cruel joke, orchestrated by someone I thought I knew. I was meant to be with you, and you should have rejected the marriage proposal from the beginning. But I couldn't. My parents are stubborn and wouldn't listen. If I had refused, I wondered what would have happened. Besides, I needed a housekeeper. As a busy doctor, I couldn't handle household chores. So I decided to marry you for practical reasons as a housekeeper. It was a mutually beneficial arrangement. You had a good place to live and meals without the burden of work. It seemed like a fair deal, especially since you appeared eager to get married, perhaps influenced by societal expectations. This 10-year relationship was a win-win situation for both of us, or so I thought. But it ends today. You should appreciate the good times we had, but now you have to live on your own without depending on others. And one more thing, don't inform my parents about our situation. If you do anything unnecessary, you know what will happen to your father. He has a contract with the hospital where he works, thanks to our marriage. I'm implying that I could sever that connection as a threat. In other words, I'm warning you not to take any actions I would find undesirable. He laughed, claiming it was my fault for being deceived, leaving me with nothing. However, unbeknownst to him, the one who would be left with nothing was him. I couldn't help but burst into laughter. "What's so funny all of a sudden?" he asked, puzzled. "I can't believe you became a doctor with that kind of knowledge," I retorted. Confused, he questioned, "What do you mean?" I had known about his mistress and the fact that he didn't submit our marriage registration all along. In fact, I had suspected his infidelity for the past 6 months, but lacked evidence to confront him. I had hired a private investigator to look into his affair. The investigator revealed 2 crucial pieces of information. First, there was evidence of my husband entering a hotel with a nurse from his workplace. Second, based on their conversations, there was a possibility that we were not legally married. "What does that mean?" I asked in disbelief. He explained, "I overheard your husband and his mistress at a cafe. They mentioned not needing to worry about alimony or property division because they never submitted a marriage registration." I couldn't believe it. We had been living as a married couple for 10 years, and the revelation that we might not be legally married was shocking. It explained why he never allowed me to handle any official procedures. This is too much. Am I just supposed to accept this? If we were never married from the start, there's nothing. I trailed off, grappling with the reality of our situation. "I can do more than you think," I asserted. Confused, my friend asked, "What do you mean?" I suggested, "Let's make him pay for deceiving you for 10 years. First, we need to prepare without him noticing." So, I initiated preparations with the investigator to hold my husband accountable. He had arrogantly claimed, "So what if you knew we were never married from the start? I don't need to take any responsibility." Mocking my supposed pitiful ignorance, he believed he was in the clear. However, I turned the tables on him. "You said I was pitiful for not knowing anything, but it seems you were the one who was pitiful," I retorted. I revealed a legal loophole. Our relationship, though never formally married, was considered a common law relationship on paper. I explained, in a common law relationship, you can actually claim alimony and divide property. Confused, he questioned, "What are these conditions?" I clarified. First, both parties must have the intention to marry. The second is living as if married, including sharing household life for over 3 years. We meet these criteria. I continued, "Even if you can claim alimony and property division, you're just an unemployed woman, planning to rely on your parents after being kicked out." With a smirk, I assured him, "Didn't I say I was preparing? I've already found a job starting next month, and I've got my eye on a new place." Defeated, he stammered, "But even if you can claim alimony and property division, do you not care what happens to your father if they want to break the contract?" Unfazed, I replied, "Let's see if they'll break a contract just because the doctor's wife of 10 years was a lie. Try saying that to my father and see if we won't be affected." As I took out my phone to inform my parents of the impending end to our relationship, he panicked, "You're not calling your parents, are you?" I calmly stated, "That's exactly what I'm doing. Our parents think we're still married. It's only natural to inform them if this relationship is ending." Surprisingly, he began to apologize to me, realizing the tables had turned. "Please let me talk to them," Don't call, he pleaded urgently. I raised an eyebrow, frustrated. Why? You know how strict my parents are. If they find out about this, I'm done. I retorted, what does that have to do with me? Are you asking me not to tell the truth because your parents are strict? Are you kidding? You could have refused the marriage from the start if you didn't intend to marry. After 10 years of a selfish marriage, you're afraid of your parents finding out. I can't accept such a convenient story. But I can't accept your story either. I'll make sure to tell both your parents and mine, I declared, and without hesitation, I called both sets of parents. All four were shocked upon hearing my story, leading to a prompt arrangement of a meeting at our house. I've heard everything over the phone. Is it true that you pretended to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration? Speak up, you foolish son, his father scolded. His response was a sheepish admission, it's true. I didn't submit it. His mother intervened. Why would you do such a thing? Didn't you think about how Emily would feel? I had no choice, he defended himself. No choice, you say? How can you even say that? It's actually your fault, Dad and Mom. I didn't want to get married yet. You started looking for a bride on your own, saying it was time I got married. You arranged meetings and tried to force a marriage on me. You're the one who agreed to the marriage, aren't you? I had to agree. If I had refused, you would have made a fuss about it. So I decided to get married, he explained, pointing the blame back at his parents. His father questioned, if you were resolved to marry, why didn't you submit the marriage registration? He cited an internet story. I read about a man in the same situation. He didn't want to marry but had to because of his parents. He lived a married life without submitting the registration and revealed the truth when he found someone he truly loved. That's appalling. What happened to that guy in the end? I asked. He's now married to the person he loves and has a real marriage. So, I too will marry my girlfriend and have a real marriage, he declared confidently. Then my parents spoke up. A real marriage, huh? Sure, you might not have had a love marriage, but do you remember what you said at the wedding? We will never forget to care for each other and build a home full of smiles. What did those words mean to you? What were we shown? We sent our daughter to you hoping for her happiness, but you deceived her for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. Did you build a home full of smiles? Now you're leaving her for another woman. Can someone who acts without a shred of care, even if they change partners, truly have a real marriage? He stammered, attempting to respond, but my father cut him off. I was happy you married our daughter, not just because you were a doctor. I thought she could build a happy home with someone as sincere as you, but it seems we were mistaken and deceived. And you threatened our daughter. If she told us about this, you'd cut off the contract with our company. Seriously. If you're going to threaten our daughter, we'll cut off the contract ourselves. Be warned. We will tell the truth when asked. Why? If you do that, there will be rumors at the hospital, my father warned. His face paled at the unexpected turn of events, and he pleaded, please wait. This is getting out of hand. Let's just talk. But my father-in-law, furious, wasn't having it. Don't mess with us, he declared, grabbing my husband by the collar. We didn't raise you to be such a scoundrel. What were you thinking? Father, please stop. By not submitting the marriage registration, you might have thought you were doing yourself a favor, but because of your selfish actions, Emily was strung along for 10 years. I interjected, my voice firm. What were you thinking, causing such trouble to others? The living room fell silent as my father-in-law confronted my husband with these stern words. Faced with the weight of those accusations, my husband had nothing more to say. I spoke up, addressing my in-laws, Emily and your parents. I'm truly sorry for the trouble caused by this idiot. No, you parents shouldn't apologize. It's not your fault. However, it's partly our responsibility as parents for letting him act this way. For now, we'll take him home and make sure he doesn't continue his reckless behavior. We'll deal with the aftermath properly. We're very sorry for all this, my father-in-law admitted. With that, my husband was taken away by his parents, back to his childhood home. You've been through a lot. For now, you should come back home and rest. We'll think about what to do next later. You don't need to worry about anything right now, my parents assured me, expressing their concern. Thank you, but I won't go back home yet. I still have things I need to do. I declined their offer and chose to stay in my own home. What I had to do was prepare for the final settlement with my now ex-husband, gathering evidence for our common law relationship. I was getting ready to claim alimony and divide our assets. A few weeks later, a meeting with a lawyer was arranged. However, even if I agreed to alimony, my ex-husband couldn't accept the idea of dividing his property. Why should I divide my property? She's been a homemaker for 10 years, never working a day. All the furniture, clothes, food. I paid for everything. Now you're telling me to hand over the money I worked hard for? The furniture I bought? He ranted, unable to accept that his money would be shared with me. The lawyer explained, yes, that's correct. The money you earned and the furniture are subject to property division. Why does it have to be like that? Who did the housework while you were working? Who cooked meals with the groceries you bought? He argued. That's irrelevant now. No, it's very relevant. A homemaker is entitled to property division because housework and childcare have economic value. Speaking as a human, not just a lawyer, do you think housework is something anyone can do? That it's just expected of a homemaker? The reason you could live freely is because of her support. Don't get that wrong, the lawyer asserted. He was taken aback, and in frustration, he said, and this situation is a result of your actions, yet you have the audacity to be selfish. The lawyer responded, what do you say? Never mind. Anyway, she's entitled to half of the assets for property division. That's how it is. Regarding alimony, we intend to claim $100,000 from you, the lawyer continued. $100,000? Why so much for a relationship that wasn't even a marriage? He protested. It's precisely because you weren't married. Normally, alimony claims in common law relationships range from $10,000 to $40,000. However, in your case, you pretended to be married for 10 years and selfishly tried to kick her out when you found someone else. The amount is determined by the severity and duration of your actions. But still, you may think 10 years is just a short time, but it's longer than you realize. During that time, she devoted herself to you, believing you were a married couple. You have no right to complain after betraying her, the lawyer explained, presenting a strong case. Unable to counter this argument, he reluctantly agreed to my demands. I also sent a notice of claim for alimony to his mistress, thanks to the investigator who revealed her identity. As he had said, she was a nurse working at the same hospital. In a panic after being served with the alimony claim from me, she confronted him at the hospital with the notice I had sent. Wait a minute. This isn't what you told me. What do you want? I told you not to talk to me at the hospital. I got this from your wife. You said there wouldn't be any alimony because we weren't married. What's this all about? She questioned him. I later learned that their confrontation at the hospital had sparked quite a scene. Okay. Let's talk about this later, not here. There are too many people around. We'll both be in trouble if this turns into a rumor. He tried to defuse the situation. I don't care about that. I can't pay this kind of alimony. You said it was okay, so you should pay it for me. What? I won't pay a penny. You were the one who wanted this relationship. You said I was the only one for you, that you wanted to marry me. Hey, quiet down. Everyone can hear us. Just so you know, I'm not in the wrong here. If you want to make amends with your wife, do it yourself. Tell her I don't owe her a penny, that you'll take care of everything. Wait, hold on. This exchange led to the revelation of their affair to the entire hospital. It quickly became the talk of the place. Then, the final blow was my father's request to the hospital. I apologize, but we would like to terminate our contract at the end of next month. The hospital, aware of the rumors, asked my father, "Excuse me for asking, but is the reason for canceling the contract related to Dr. Michael's affair? It's already become a rumor." Yes, a nurse presumed to be involved caused quite a scene. I never imagined he had been pretending to be married for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration. I never expected it to turn out like this. You mean he never submitted the registration? Weren't you aware that he hadn't submitted the marriage registration? All we knew was that he, being married, had an affair. What do you mean he didn't submit the marriage registration? With my father's request, it was revealed that he had been deceiving me for 10 years by not submitting the marriage registration. This news spread among the other nurses. Dr. Michael deceived his wife for 10 years without submitting a marriage registration, and he had an affair with a nurse. How low? How could he do that? Can someone really not notice for 10 years? Apparently, Emily's maiden name was the same, and he managed all the official paperwork. That's scary. The rumors spread not only among hospital staff, but also to patients, and both Michael and his mistress received cold stares. Unable to endure, they soon resigned from the hospital. As my father told me, "Did you manage to get the alimony?" "Yes, I received payments from both him and his mistress." She refused to pay until the end, claiming she was deceived. But the lawyer made it clear her argument wouldn't hold, and she reluctantly agreed to pay. That's good. What about you, Dad? Did the contract get canceled after all? No, that's off the table. He resigned, and since our company is trusted, the hospital asked us not to cancel the contract. We couldn't cancel it after they asked like that. That's a relief. Then I started a new life in a new place and was living happily. About a year and a half later, my ex-husband contacted me. "Is it true you got remarried?" I had married a man I met at work, and somehow he had found out. I wondered whose number this was, going through the trouble of changing your number just to contact me. Just answer my question. Yes, I got married. You betrayed me. Betray. We were never legally married, so I didn't think it would matter to you, right? That's a different matter. Indeed, things are different now. We're completely separated, so my marriage has nothing to do with you. Is that why you contacted me? After I said this, he seemed at a loss for words. Then he taunted. Of course, you're still unmarried, since you probably haven't submitted a marriage registration again. You're that kind of woman. But things weren't as he imagined. Unfortunately for him, my husband isn't the kind of person to do such terrible things. He knows all about your story. So to ensure I wouldn't feel anxious, we went to the office together to submit the registration. Sadly for you, things aren't as you thought. I can somewhat understand your wish for me to be unhappy, considering your own misery. But sorry, we're happily married. I told him this and hung up the phone. What kind of life he leads now, I don't know. But unless he changes his selfish nature, it's unlikely he'll ever find happiness. My mother suffered a stroke, and if it's severe, she may lose the ability to walk or require daily care. The day after receiving this distressing news, I returned home to find my husband Jake and my mother-in-law engaged in conversation in the living room. Tears welled up in my eyes as I shared the situation with them, but Jake's response was unexpectedly cold. What are you talking about? She's elderly, right? Shouldn't we just leave her care to a facility? He callously remarked. You must be joking. She's my only mother. I responded, searching for the right words. However, my plea was met with a dismissive attitude. You're already a part of this family, right? You shouldn't get involved in your family matters. Even if there's an expense, we can't bear it. My son is right. I wish that old woman would just pass away soon, added my mother-in-law. Those words shook me to the core. I might have endured such remarks if they were directed at me, but I couldn't forgive the insult towards my mother. In that moment, I silently vowed to myself that someday I would find a way to stand up to these two. That opportunity presented itself a year later. I, Lisa Furr, was a 29-year-old housewife. Prior to living with my mother, I had dedicated myself to a successful career at a major company. My father's sudden demise from illness left only my mother, Susan, to be my constant support. In my heart, she held a special place. Her warm embraces and unwavering strength were a daily reassurance. Despite not leading a lavish life, my mother took on various part-time jobs to provide everything I needed, including tuition for hobbies and classes. Driven by a deep desire to one day offer her a comfortable life, I studied diligently and eventually secured a position at the company of my dreams. When my employment was confirmed, my mother shared in my joy by embracing me. "I'm so glad your dreams have come true," she expressed her genuine happiness. Jake Filler, who later became my husband, was my first mentor at the new job. He guided me through the intricacies of the role, and our mutual trust deepened. As we started having dinner together more frequently, our emotional connection naturally grew. Following his passionate confession, our relationship evolved into a romantic one, and we began dating. Jake was assertive and experienced, leading our relationship with confidence. At 26, he made a significant proposal. "Lisa, would you start a new chapter with me? I promise to make you happy." "Thank you, Jake. I'm truly overjoyed," I replied, accepting the radiant ring he offered. As I slid it onto my finger, a profound sense of happiness enveloped me, and Jake gazed at me with deep intensity. "Lisa, how do you think we should tell your mom about our marriage?" "Well, I believe no matter how we put it, she'll be overjoyed. After all, she genuinely wants the best for us," I replied, nestled in Jake's embrace as we admired the twinkling city lights, feeling like we were on cloud nine. A few weeks later, the moment arrived to share our engagement news with my mother. As we made our way to her home, a mix of excitement and nervousness filled my heart. When we finally broke the news, her eyes immediately welled up with tears of happiness. "Lisa, it feels like a dream. Congratulations from the depths of my heart." "Thank you, Mom." "Please don't cry," I urged gently. "Jake, promise me you'll take good care of my dear Lisa. Ensure she experiences the happiness that outweighs any hardships she's faced," my mother implored, her words resonating deeply with Jake, who nodded earnestly. "Absolutely, I will treasure our future together," Jake vowed, his sincerity evident. Witnessing the heartfelt exchange between my mother and Jake filled me with immense joy. Later, we arranged to visit Jake's family home. I knew that his parents had divorced when he was young, and now he lived with his mother. Despite feeling nervous about meeting my future mother-in-law for the first time, I was determined to make a positive impression. Carefully selecting my attire and hairstyle, and picking out special traditional sweets as a gift, I arrived at their home. "Nice to meet you. I'm Lisa Paston. I'm looking forward to getting to know you." I greeted her tentatively, noticing her scrutinizing gaze. There was a hint of judgment in her eyes. "Ah, Jake, so you've chosen a girl who appears quiet and reserved. That's unexpected," she remarked, catching me off guard with her blunt observation. "Mom, please don't judge solely based on appearances. Lisa is a remarkable person inside and out," Jake defended, his voice firm yet gentle. "I was hoping for someone with depth rather than superficial charm," she continued, her tone critical. "I understand, but I imagined a more glamorous bride for you. And about the gift, I have a sweet tooth. A cake would have been preferable," she remarked, eyeing the cookies I had brought before placing them on the table. "I apologize. I should have been more considerate," I replied with a slight tremor in my voice, feeling the tension ease as Jake guided me to sit beside him. "Putting that aside, Mom, we've been considering taking the next step and getting married," Jake disclosed. Upon hearing this significant news, his mother sighed deeply and after a brief pause, responded, "I figured it was about time, Jake. All right, I understand. Thank you so much. We truly appreciate your understanding. However, if you're going to live here, I'd like you to quit your job and help around the house." "Wait, really?" I was taken aback by her sudden demand, turning to Jake with surprise and concern. "I've always wanted to maintain my career after marriage. I made sure to communicate this clearly to him in advance. I had envisioned a life just for the two of us." "I understand. But if Mom says so, it's a wife's duty, right?" Jake's unexpected statement left me shocked. "Jake, I clearly communicated my desire to continue working even after we get married, right?" "Yeah, I remember that conversation. But I've been thinking it might be better if you didn't work after we get married." What's your reasoning? Well, I think it would be a bit complicated to work at the same company with my wife. Plus, I don't want people to think I can't support our household on my own income. As I listened to his words, I felt overwhelmed. But what about living together? Weren't we planning to start a new life together, just the two of us? I don't recall discussing that specifically. I've always lived with my parents, so I just assumed we'd naturally live with them. But my family home is quite far from here, isn't it? There's a 2-hour drive between my parents' home and your parents'. Leaving my mother was a significant concern for me. His words deeply surprised me. However, Jake remained firm in his beliefs and continued to passionately express his views. Lisa, why are you so shocked? In the tradition of marriage, women often leave their family homes to live with their husband's family. So the situation with your family really doesn't matter. From now on, my mother will become your new family. But in my heart, are you reconsidering the marriage itself? Your mother would be heartbroken. She's genuinely happy about our upcoming marriage. I felt that Jake's words contained an undeniable truth. Consequently, with a heavy heart, I decided to choose a life with him in his home. Giving up my career and distancing myself from my cherished family home was a painful decision. However, my mother respected my choice and offered warm words of encouragement. Lisa, marriage comes with its share of challenges, but building strong relationships with Jake and his mother is crucial. Amidst these challenges, never forget to make sincere efforts. Mom, thank you. I'll cherish your words and do my best. After our wedding, we moved to Jake's house to embark on our new life. On the first day, his mother greeted me with stern words. From now on, you'll be the heart of this house and will take on all household chores. I won't tolerate any negligence, so give it your all. Despite her years as a housewife, her expectations surpassed my assumptions. Despite my initial bewilderment, I resolved to tackle my new daily life sincerely. While my mother-in-law seemed more interested in the TV show and snacking than doing chores, I diligently cleaned the messy house, visible dust and dirt. Cleaning wasn't the only task. I also had to prepare dinner and handle the laundry. Soon, Jake returned from work, and as we sat down for dinner, my mother-in-law frowned and commented, "What's this? Doesn't this dish taste a bit bland?" I followed a cookbook and even tasted it myself to ensure the seasoning was right. Yet my mother-in-law candidly showed her discontent, pouring a lot of soy sauce over her dish. Even Jake added more soy sauce to his meal. "I think the taste might be a bit bland, Lisa. You made this, right?" "Yes, I made it." "How about learning more about the traditional flavors of my mom's dishes?" "As a full-time housewife, you might want to do that, right?" "Understood. I'll be careful." Seeing me like this, my mother-in-law seemed somewhat satisfied. Yet, her criticisms continued, pointing out even trivial things related to housework. For about a year, I led a tough life, constantly losing weight due to stress. Despite my mother's genuine happiness about my marriage, I couldn't easily suggest getting a divorce. Amidst such circumstances, my cell phone rang. "Hello. What, my mom?" The renowned hospital in my hometown informed me that my mother had suddenly fallen ill and was brought in. Her condition was serious, and they wanted me to come to the hospital immediately. At that moment, my mother-in-law was visiting her friend, and Jake was busy at work. I quickly messaged Jake about the situation, left a note for my mother-in-law, and hastily left the house. At the hospital, I learned that my mother had suffered a severe stroke. The doctors performed a successful operation, but there was a possibility she might need rehabilitation. Filled with shock and concern, I continued holding my mother's hand by her side. When her condition stabilized for a moment, I decided to temporarily return home. As I entered the house, my husband Jake and my mother-in-law were waiting, their expressions cold and accusatory. "Why is a stay-at-home wife leaving the house this much? Last night, Mom and I had no choice but to eat out." The read receipt on my message was definitely there. I couldn't believe that Jake, who should have fully grasped the situation, was indifferent to my mother's emergency. Naturally, I had no choice but to go to her regardless. As tears began to form in my eyes, I implored Jake and my mother-in-law. Mom had a severe stroke. There's a chance she might be left with paralysis in her body or speech. She might need daily care. Seeming a bit shocked by the news, Jake responded, "That's concerning. So, how do you plan to deal with your mother's condition going forward?" I haven't decided on the specifics yet, but if needed, I intend to fully care for my mother. I'd appreciate it if you could understand that, I replied, my voice trembling with emotion. I see. But do you really need to spend your time caring for an elderly person? Wouldn't it be better to just put her in an affordable facility? Jake's words cut deep, disbelief coursing through me. What? I can't believe what you're saying. She's my beloved mother. Please don't be so cold-hearted, I desperately retorted. Jake coldly let out a sarcastic snort. Haven't I told you many times since you married into this family? What happens in your original home is no longer your concern. And if you're thinking about a facility, we won't contribute a dime. Don't expect any help from us, Jake retorted, his tone devoid of empathy. Exactly, chimed in my mother-in-law, her words like daggers. If that old woman were gone, things would be a bit easier for us. Rage swelled inside me, my heart heavy with hurt and anger. I could never forgive them for speaking ill of my mother, not just criticizing me, but showing such callousness towards her plight. I vowed never to forgive them for their attitude, no matter what happened. Renewing my determination to eventually retaliate against them, I stood there, unable to put my feelings into words. Silently, I left the room and hurried back to my own, where my love for Jake had already vanished, replaced by anger towards him and my mother-in-law. However, I knew I couldn't act rashly. My mother's health was still unstable, and I needed to carefully plan my next steps. Under the harsh scrutiny of my mother-in-law and husband, I continued visiting my mother at the hospital. Surprisingly, her surgery went smoother than expected, and it turned out her paralysis was very mild. After about half a year of hospitalization and rehabilitation, the doctors declared that my mother could live at home again. Lisa, I'm sorry for causing you so much worry because of me. Did I cause any trouble for Jake or your mother-in-law? Despite her own difficult situation, my mother was genuinely concerned about how I was adapting to life in my in-laws' house. Her compassion touched my heart, filling it with both pain and gratitude. Unable to express my thanks in words, I just smiled and squeezed her hand tightly. Meanwhile, the situation in my in-laws' house was different. My mother, father-in-law, and my husband started blaming me for using my mother's condition as a shield, accusing me of neglecting my duties at home because I was too concerned about my own family. My mother-in-law, with a sharp gaze, said, "What are you thinking, neglecting your duties in our house because you're worried about your mother?" Despite my best efforts to fulfill my domestic responsibilities, I found myself under such accusations. In the midst of this blame game, Jake also raised his voice against me. Honestly, Mom, I didn't think through this marriage well enough back then. I never thought it would become this difficult. My mother-in-law responded with a tilt of her head, saying, "If we had known, I would have opposed the marriage from the start." Jake, with a somewhat downcast expression, said, "I'm really sorry, Mom. I'll think more carefully and act responsibly from now on." Angrily, my mother-in-law shot back, "It's all her fault. None of this would have happened if she had just properly done her housework." Even as I heard their words, I pretended to feel nothing and continued with my chores. Day by day, I gradually spoke less at home, acting like a machine just going through the motions of housework. Nevertheless, they continued to criticize me even more harshly. Meanwhile, I secretly recorded their harsh words. Using my free time, I also continued to study and acquire qualifications for the future. I was preparing for a future where, even if I ended up separating from Jake, I would be able to live on my own. Despite my daily chores, I did not neglect my efforts towards further growth and qualification acquisition, even if it meant cutting down on my sleep. About a year after my mother's health deteriorated, while I was folding laundry at home, my cell phone rang. "Hello, Is this Mrs. Jake Foster's wife? This is from his workplace. The content of the call was an unexpected event. Jake had been in a traffic accident while commuting during work, and he was immediately taken to a nearby hospital. I calmly accepted the news and specifically conveyed the information to my mother-in-law, who reacted with a panicked expression. "We need to hurry. I will go ahead to the hospital. You should organize the necessary things for the transfer and hospital stay and then follow later." Mother-in-law hastily left the house. I quietly watched her leave and then decided to first complete the administrative procedures I had planned to do at the city office. After returning home from the city office, I spent a long time alone in my room, savoring the silence I hadn't felt in a long time. The morning came, and as the light of a new day streamed through the windows, I slowly woke up. I readied myself and made my way to the hospital where Jake had been admitted. As I slowly opened the door to his hospital room, my mother-in-law, who was waiting, showered me with words of indignation. "What were you doing? You finally came at this time, and while Jake is in such a condition," she exclaimed. Taking a deep breath, I approached Jake's bed. He weakly opened his eyes and seemed to recognize me. Jake had suffered major damage to his spine from the traffic accident. Right now, he was unable to move his lower body. The hospital room was quiet, and only the sunlight streaming in from the window brought a sense of warmth. My mother-in-law stood next to Jake's bed, her eyes filled with tears as she worriedly looked at him. Jake began to speak to me in a weak voice. "I understand that my current situation is tough, but I want to get back to our everyday life at home, Lisa. I think I'm going to need your support for the life ahead." I couldn't meet Jake's pleading gaze and instead formed a light smile as I took out a piece of paper from my bag. It was a divorce paper I had received from the city office yesterday afternoon. My part was already properly signed and stamped. "Jake, I want you to sign this divorce paper," I said calmly. "What? What are you talking about, Lisa?" The color drained from my husband's and mother-in-law's faces at these astonishing words. I took a deep breath and continued speaking calmly. "I haven't forgotten the time you told my frail mother to go to a facility. Why should I take care of you when you can say something like that? Maybe you should consider a facility too. It would be less of a financial burden." "Lisa, are you really saying this?" There was surprise and confusion in my mother-in-law's voice, and at that moment, I could feel how much she was hurting. Maintaining my calm demeanor, I slowly slid the papers toward Jake. "You can fill out these papers once you're feeling better. I will be leaving this house today, so from now on, you and your mom will need to support each other, just the two of you." "Is this a joke, Lisa? Are you serious? Are you really going to abandon me in this state?" Despite his frustrated voice, I maintained my resolve and replied, "Who was it that ignored and neglected my precious mother a year ago? I can't believe you've forgotten. I wonder who would help people like you. Actions always come back to you. I really hope you too receive what you deserve. Just accept your punishment and go straight to hell, you worthless beings." Leaving Jake and my mother-in-law stunned in disbelief behind, I quickly left the place. Hours later, before my mother-in-law returned home, I packed up all my belongings and returned to my childhood home. I had informed my mother about what happened beforehand, so she welcomed me with a warm and gentle expression. As a result, Jake and I had no room for reconciliation, and after a messy divorce process, our divorce was officially finalized. Having firmly recorded Jake's and his mother's inappropriate remarks played a big part, and I was able to receive a satisfactory division of assets. Afterward, it seems Jake returned to his home. I've heard rumors that his mother has taken over his care. Although he got some insurance money, working like before is difficult for him, and it seems he ultimately had to retire. He's now shut himself in at home, and it appears his mother is supporting him through his reckless days. She, influenced by the long-giving life, has also aged considerably. When I heard all this information, I didn't feel a bit of sympathy. I truly wish them what they deserve. As for me, I've started living together with my mother again, and have re-entered the workforce after studying for certifications. I was able to successfully change jobs to a workplace with almost the same conditions as my previous company. Fortunately, my mother's health has been steadily recovering, and recently, I can see her passionately engaging in her favorite hobbies. Seeing that, I feel truly relieved. Moving forward as we live together, I strongly feel that we should support each other while I give my all at work, building a bright future together. My father has been expanding and generating profits within the company founded by my grandfather. Recently, he promised to transfer a luxurious villa, a mansion, to me. However, I've come to the realization that what's rightfully yours should also be mine as your husband. This mansion is now mine, and I plan to hire you as a housemaid. If you're not on board with that, well, you can always consider divorce. As it turns out, despite the mansion supposedly being in my name, my husband had clandestinely inscribed his own name on the legal papers. Does he genuinely believe that's acceptable? Does he comprehend the potential consequences of such actions? My name is Aaron, and while I don't intend to boast, I was born into a wealthy family. My father, the CEO of several companies, inherited the business from my grandfather, who initially started a small shop repairing and selling TVs and music systems. Over time, the company flourished, expanding into various branches and diversifying into the IT sector. My father's foresight, selling computers and accessories before they gained widespread popularity, proved to be a lucrative move. Besides IT, he ventured into real estate, collaborating with local businesses and actively contributing to community development. My mother served as the vice president of the company, and after studying it in college, I joined the family business. Despite the outward appearance of affluence, we didn't live as extravagantly as portrayed in TV dramas. My father believed in instilling good values, rejecting the notion that spoiling a child aids in their responsible growth. Our family home was spacious, and we had a maid, but as a child, I actively participated in household chores. Dining at fancy restaurants occurred infrequently, and our international travels were limited to once a year, with the majority being local trips. My school life seemed quite ordinary, and it would have been challenging for anyone to guess that my family was affluent. Due to my unassuming demeanor, I dated guys within my age group, just like any other girl. Among them, Michael, who later became my husband, was one of my colleagues at the same workplace. During those times, I worked as a sales representative and office manager at an IT-related shop, and Michael was also a sales rep there. I chose not to disclose that my father was the CEO to my coworkers, making it easier for Michael to approach me. I noticed that he was straightforward and had no reservations. Although I didn't seek extravagance, I'd always suggested places within Michael's budget. During our dates at restaurants, he would order generously, explaining that if there's extra, he'd eat it, opting for a cost-effective approach to enjoy a hearty meal. Some might have considered him a bit frugal, but I found it endearing. Unbeknownst to him, I earned several times more than he did, content with my fair compensation for the responsibilities I held. I unconsciously became accommodating. Michael, always keen on budget-friendly ways to satisfy his appetite, received my gestures with gratitude. During our dates, I'd often bought extra food or thoughtful gifts, knowing he would appreciate them. When shopping for clothes, I would add extra socks for him, and on occasions when I got a new bedspread, I'd include pajamas and a pillow for him. I genuinely enjoyed making him happy. Even when visiting his home, I willingly cooked for him and took care of the cleanup. Out of the blue, Michael proposed to me one day, expressing that there was no one better than me. At that moment, I hesitated, harboring reservations. After all, my father was the CEO of a major company, and he held a prominent position at my current workplace. I feared that if Michael were to discover this, he might reconsider our relationship. Deciding to take Michael to my parents' home for the first time, I aimed to introduce him to my family and disclose everything about our background. If he accepted it all, I would be more than willing to marry him. As Michael's inaugural visit to my family home approached, he appeared visibly nervous. However, my dad, though strict on occasion, generally exuded a calm demeanor. When I presented Michael as the man I was contemplating marrying, my father welcomed him with a warm smile, alleviating some of Michael's tension. Although surprised to learn about my father's CEO status, Michael managed to navigate the visit smoothly with my father's supportive demeanor. Upon leaving the house, Michael exclaimed about the enormity and magnificence of the residence, expressing gratitude for my father's kindness. He even suggested that we could get along well. When I casually mentioned my dad's ownership of additional buildings and a vacation home, Michael appeared more astonished. Despite the revelation, he resolved to marry me, the daughter of such a prominent man, and I agreed wholeheartedly. Eventually, we became a married couple. However, something bothered me. At the moment of accepting his proposal, I noticed a slightly mischievous grin on Michael's face for a split second. Dismissing it as his quirky way of smiling, I didn't dwell on it, but perhaps had I paid more attention, I could have averted the impending tragedy. As Michael and I moved into a typical, not overly luxurious apartment, he seemed to grasp the significance of my father's status. Yet I never explicitly disclosed my income, maintaining a modest lifestyle. Gradually, Michael's demeanor changed after settling in. While I balanced work and household responsibilities, he started demanding more. One evening, as I prepared dinner, he asked, "What's for dinner tonight?" In response, I informed him that I had prepared his favorite curry rice. However, to my surprise, he appeared dissatisfied as he sat on the sofa. Letting out a sigh, he expressed his desire for something like a prime beef steak once in a while. This caught me off guard, as he had never complained about my cooking before. I pointed out that prime beef was quite expensive, but he clicked his tongue in annoyance, insisting that, considering my father's earnings, indulging in prime beef occasionally should not be a big deal. Reluctantly, I agreed to get prime beef for the next day. Michael smirked, stating that we should be able to enjoy such things normally from now on. While my salary could afford such luxuries, my previous lifestyle had instilled a reluctance to spend so extravagantly. However, to avoid issues early in our marriage, I resigned myself to the decision to actually cook prime beef steak. Unfortunately, Michael's lavish tendencies did not stop there. He frequently requested expensive ingredients for meals and specified upscale restaurants when we went out. His cravings extended beyond food, manifesting in desires for a TV larger than 60 inches and even suggesting we should purchase a massage chair for the sake of relaxation after work. These remarks became more frequent, and I began to feel that it was getting out of hand. I questioned the need for such extravagant items, expressing my concern about the expenses involved. Frustrated, I finally retorted, asking him if he thought we were made of money. I challenged his extravagant lifestyle, stating that living so lavishly was unnecessary. In response, Michael made a displeased face and clicked his tongue again, expressing his discontent. He argued that, as the husband, he contributed to the household expenses and insisted that I should listen to him. However, his statements puzzled me, as his contributions, while appreciated, did not amount to a lavish sum. In fact, I contributed more, a fact I never disclosed to him. Despite my substantial financial input, he made these assertions without hesitation. This change in Michael's behavior left me questioning his mindset. He was not like this before, and I couldn't comprehend why he had changed at that moment. I found myself in a state of confusion, unable to comprehend Michael's recent behavior. In response to his audacious requests, I decided to temporarily appease the situation by telling him, "All right, I'll think about it." Little did I know that the explanation for his bold behavior would become apparent just a few days later. On that particular day, my father summoned me to the office of our shop where I worked, claiming that he had something important to discuss. While Michael was engrossed in his work, my father entered the office and initiated a serious conversation. He expressed uncertainty about how much longer he could continue as the CEO and hinted at the possibility of me taking over in the future. Furthermore, he mentioned transferring the vacation home to me. This vacation home, briefly mentioned to Michael earlier, resembled a large lodge located about a 30-minute drive away. It was a place where my father used to host gatherings with town shop owners, under the guise of meetings. Although such meetings were no longer held, the house was consistently ready to be lived in, maintained by a housekeeper. My father offered me the freedom to use the vacation home however I wanted. This proposition left me torn, as I had no concrete idea of how to utilize such a property. The vacation home boasted over 6,000 square feet, with a lavish garden surrounded by nature, akin to a mansion. Lacking the social connections to host significant parties, I contemplated keeping it as an asset. I conveyed to my father that I would positively consider his proposal but needed more time to make a decision. He assured me there was no rush and left a contract on the desk before departing the shop. Returning home after work, I leaned towards accepting the mansion, intending to give it further thought the next day. However, the following day brought an unexpected turn of events. Upon arriving at work, I discovered that Michael, who typically arrived before me, was absent from the shop. Intrigued, I entered the office only to find him there. Instinctively, I asked, "What are you doing here?" To my surprise, he flashed a document in my face, stating, "I overheard the conversation about the mansion yesterday. Sounds like an amazing deal, right?" Dumbfounded by Michael's audacious move, I reluctantly signed the document he flaunted, a contract my father had handed me just the day before. Shockingly, Michael had inscribed his own name on it. I was utterly taken aback and couldn't help but express my disbelief. "What on earth are you doing?" I questioned him, but Michael, without a hint of remorse, casually responded, "Why not? Your dad said he's giving away an amazing mansion, right? If you won't decide, I figured I'd take it." He said this with a smirk, but there was no way I could accept it. Persistently, I pleaded with him, emphasizing the house's worth of $4 million and my father's intention to give it to me. However, Michael dismissed my concerns with a nonchalant laugh. $4 million? Dan, that's impressive. Think about it. I have the right to this mansion because you're my wife, and I'm your husband, so I have a right to what's yours. Moreover, your dad really likes me. He probably won't have any complaints. So from today, this villa is my house. If you live in a wealthy house, you've got to make use of it. How about I hire you as a maid in this mansion? If you have any complaints, I'll divorce you anytime, he confidently declared. It was at that moment when I recalled Michael's past actions and words, and everything finally clicked. He seemingly had no qualms about taking from others, even if it meant practically stealing, without feeling guilty. During our dating days, I'd always showered him with gifts, but he never reciprocated. My giving nature might have corrupted him, leading him to believe that what was mine was automatically his. My dad's kindness to Michael likely made him feel my father was easy to manipulate, and perhaps he perceived me as even more gullible. With a plan forming in my mind, I decided to confront him. I declared, "Fine then. This mansion is yours, but I'm not going to be your maid. Let's get a divorce. Take care." After that, I returned to my job and, during my lunch break, called a divorce lawyer to initiate the process. Michael, seemingly unfazed, responded with bravado, claiming he was fine with it and canceling the lease on his current place. Little did he know that tragedy was about to hit him, and he just hadn't realized it yet. Later, I went back to my parents' place and shared everything with my father. From that point on, everything unfolded according to my plan. A few weeks later, Michael called me in a state of panic, having received an enormous bill. While his shock was understandable, it was only fair, considering the fixed property tax on the $4 million house he had claimed as his own. I casually informed Michael that he should expect to pay around that much for the property tax. However, he appeared utterly clueless, lacking knowledge that paying tax on owned property is common. Normally, my father would have covered the tax if he had received the property, but upon hearing the entire story, my usually calm father was furious. Despite my warnings about my father's strict nature, he declared, "He can have it if he can afford it. and accepted the property transfer to Michael. To be honest, a part of me wanted Michael to learn a tough lesson, and there was no way he could afford the hefty amount. Frustrated with Michael's persistent pleas, I decided to deliver a final blow. The annual property tax, I revealed, amounted to about $60,000. It dawned on me that Michael always had a mindset of trying to take advantage of his friends, possibly driving them away and leaving him without anyone to teach him common sense. Acknowledging that I may have been a bit unreasonable, I admitted that my once cute perception of Michael had drastically changed. Without any sympathy left, I hung up the phone. Subsequently, Michael couldn't sustain living in the house and faced forced eviction. Realizing he couldn't afford it, my father reverted the property deed back to my name, incurring the gift tax himself. Meanwhile, Michael faced severe consequences. He was fired from his job and charged with unlawfully changing the property deed. He received scoldings from his parents and was shunned by acquaintances. Now jobless and friendless, he barely scraped by in a rundown apartment, working odd jobs. His parents were even considering disowning him. As for me, I've been gradually preparing to take over my father's company. My father once told me that success in business doesn't come from looking for shortcuts. Reflecting on the fact that I almost married Michael, I deeply understand the truth in his words. Inspired by my father's greatness, I push forward every day in my involvement in running the business. Finally, free from any more baggage, today marks the beginning of our life together with my parents at my house. However, as soon as my parents passed away, my husband, who had demolished our family home, dropped a bombshell on me. Standing in front of the now non-existent house, he declared, "What are you talking about? Have you lost your mind too? Come to our house with the inheritance. Quick." His words left me dumbfounded, and I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Ah, I see. That's what this was all about. Perplexed, my husband, Howard, and my in-laws looked at me incredulously. What? Why are you laughing? I revealed the truth to them. My name is Deborah Jackson. I was born into an ordinary salaried worker family. I married Howard at 29, raised 2 children, and now, at 55, I expected a quiet life with my husband. But life took an unexpected turn. I recounted the challenges of caring for my ailing parents, particularly my mother's battle with cancer. Despite my efforts, my husband's reaction to living with my sick mother was unexpected and less than supportive. I suggested living with my mother for her sake, but Howard was reluctant. His complaints about meals, cleaning, and laundry were hurtful. Despite the challenges, we moved to my family home to care for my mother, even though Howard's initial attitude remained unchanged. As time passed, my mother's health deteriorated, leading to her hospitalization and eventual passing. Despite the emotional turmoil, Howard's lack of support during the funeral preparations left me deeply disappointed. In times like these, one wishes for their spouse's support. However, Howard was off to the side with his parents, not helping with the funeral preparations. Even during the funeral, he remained at the back of the relatives section. "Howard, I wish you would sit in the family area." I couldn't help but wish for the support that never came. When I suggested that Howard should sit with me in the family area during my mother's funeral, he responded, "No, I'm fine here. I'm not a blood relative after all." His mother, who was listening, interjected, "He's your husband, but not your mother's son, right? Howard is my son, so he's an outsider. An outsider, that's right. Howard's parents are just us. Deborah should sit in the family area alone." Even his parents echoed the sentiment, stating that Howard should not be in the family area. While seating arrangements for family members may vary by region, in our area, it's customary for sons-in-law to sit in the family area. Predictably, with Howard not in the family area, distant relatives started whispering and speculating about our relationship. After the funeral, we returned home with my brother's family, children, Howard, and his parents. Despite their insensitive remarks, I thanked Howard's parents for coming and served them coffee. However, their callousness reached new heights when they casually remarked about the condolence money being tough on them, implying relief at the end of the financial burden with my mother's passing. Stunned by their words, I forced a smile and left the room. Overhearing Howard and his parents' conversation, I learned more about their true feelings. Howard complained about living with someone else, and his parents joined in mocking me. It wasn't the first time. They had always been disrespectful, even during our marriage, reflecting on their lack of concern during my father's funeral and mother's death. I questioned Howard's behavior as a person. I realized that I had been overly considerate of him, feeling guilty for imposing the living arrangement. Angry and resentful, I silently listened to their laughter and chatter. Later, in a conversation between Howard and his parents, they openly disapproved of my defiance regarding my mother's belongings. When they tried to take my mother's bag, I firmly refused, stating my intention to distribute her keepsakes among family members later. This led to a heated argument, with Howard and his parents leaving angrily, labeling me an outsider. Despite explaining the situation to everyone, Howard didn't return home for some time. When he finally did, he surprised me by showing concern and suggesting a trip for me and the kids, even providing travel vouchers. Though unexpected, I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions, including gratitude and confusion, at this unexpected gesture from Howard. I wonder if your father felt guilty, I said with a laugh as I decided to gratefully accept the travel vouchers from Howard. Well, I'll be off then. Yeah, take your time. Since you're at it, stay over at the kids' places, Howard suggested. I can't be away that long, I replied. Just go. I'll relax at my parents' house. Don't worry about me, Howard said, sending me off with those words. Julia was happy to have me over. So before the trip, I visited Julia's and then Luke's homes, having been unable to visit while caring for my mother. I helped out a bit by making and freezing some meals for them. Mom, you don't get to relax at all, but thank you. It really helps. They both expressed gratitude for my home-cooked meals. This was all thanks to Howard's suggestion. Then came the long-awaited trip, and I spent a relaxing time at the hotel with my children. It seemed to heal much of the fatigue and sorrow from caregiving and losing my parents. I was away for nearly a week, but both kids returned to their homes with bright smiles. That was fun. We should thank Dad once in a while, Julia suggested. Really? Once in a while? But I wonder if he's up to something, I laughed, half-jokingly. Don't say that. Your father must have had his reasons, Julia replied. I laughed as well, planning to share the memories with Howard and start afresh in our married life. However, upon arriving home, I was at a loss for words. What's going on? The house is... I looked around in confusion, checking my location. Despite being a familiar place, our family home was gone. Then Howard appeared from nowhere, with his parents behind him, smirking at my dumbfounded expression. Howard, what's the meaning of this? I asked. Howard, like his parents, replied with an eerie smile. Finally, the baggage is gone. From today, we'll be living with my parents at my house. What are you talking about? I retorted calmly to Howard's arrogant statement. Then Howard spoke. Lost your mind? Your family home has been demolished. Come to our house with the inheritance. Already, everything you inherited belongs to Howard. I realized what had happened. The disappearance of my house was Howard's doing, all for the sake of inheritance. Despite being overwhelmed with frustration and sadness, I couldn't let Howard have his way. No way, I thought to myself. I burst into laughter at their smirking faces. What? Why are you laughing? What a strange woman. Has she gone mad? My mother-in-law looked at me as if I were something eerie. I faced them and spoke up. Don't you guys know? Know what? I then said to Howard, first of all, I didn't inherit a single penny, so there's no inheritance. I started laughing again after saying this. Maybe they thought they had become rich through inheritance. Their wild imaginations and actions were simply laughable to me. What do you mean? Explain yourself? Howard demanded an explanation, but I remained silent. I thought there was no need to enlighten them before that. I'm not going to live with strangers. If you want to live together, do it alone. Ignoring Howard's question and rejecting his initial proposition, my mother-in-law flared up in anger. You helped with your parents' household, but you won't do ours. You know why I did that, right? I agreed to live together, didn't I? I said we didn't need to live together, but you chose to do so because you didn't want to do housework. My rebuttal left Howard and my mother-in-law biting their lips in frustration and demolishing my family home on your own. There are things you can and can't do. I yelled at them on the spot, then left the scene. Behind me, Howard's voice called out, "Where are you going?" However, I didn't turn back. I had to secure a place to sleep for the night, and I didn't want to see Howard's face. I immediately consulted a lawyer. It couldn't be that easy to demolish a house. The house was still in my mother's name. When I wondered which company had taken the job, an unbelievable truth came to light. Howard and my father-in-law had directly demolished the house themselves. They had meticulously prepared, enlisting the help of acquaintances from my father-in-law's demolition company and renting heavy machinery. Moreover, they had given me the travel vouchers to drive me out. The realization of being utterly deceived brought tears to my eyes and filled me with frustration. Is there any way to punish the three of them? I asked the lawyer through tears, and he smiled kindly. Your husband, who demolished the house registered under your mother's name without permission, can be charged with criminal damage and sued for compensation. Let's start by demanding a proper apology from your husband and his parents. I nodded at his words, and the lawyer promptly started the proceedings. A few days later, an irate call came from Howard. What's this letter of demand about? Oh, you received it. Since you destroyed our important house, you'll have to compensate for it. Compensate. I told you we were moving into the family home. I demolished an unused house for you. You should be grateful, not demanding compensation. Just bring your inheritance and come back home. Howard arrogantly insisted. Grateful for being demolished? Really? And about the inheritance coming home? There's none to bring since I didn't inherit anything. I shouted back over the phone. Howard fell silent, seemingly stunned by my outburst. The reason I laughed when the house was demolished was precisely this. I had a whole year to spend with my mother. It was obvious we would have discussed the inheritance. Then I said, I don't need anything. Give it all to my brother. Thus, all cash and securities were inherited by my brother. He said that I should get the house since he lived far away and couldn't manage it. If I wasn't going to live there, it could be rented out to someone else. That was the plan for me to inherit the house anyway. Either you and your father restore the family home to its original state or pay the amount written there. This amount, I'm being kind enough to suggest a settlement. If you can't pay, I'll file a police report and sue you, I spoke firmly. Sorry, I didn't think you'd be so angry. Of course, Howard replied. I'm angry. Howard began making excuses. He thought that as long as the family home was there, he couldn't live with his parents, especially since his father had always wanted to live with us. My father-in-law was fond of Luke and seemed to have wanted to live with him. He had refused to live together back then because it would have made commuting difficult, but his parents seemed to think I was the one opposed to it. So it turns out that Howard had convinced his parents to agree to this plan by demolishing my family home and making them believe I would move in with the inheritance. But even knowing this now, there's no way I can forgive it, so please forgive me. I didn't mean any harm. Dad is remorseful too. If he's truly remorseful, then he'll agree to the settlement. I said this and hung up the phone. Howard kept calling me and sending messages to apologize. If you're sorry, then hurry up and transfer the money. I pushed Howard away with these words. I knew our family home couldn't be restored, but there was no other way to alleviate these unbearable feelings. Afterward, I stayed at Julia's house. My brother's family and my children knew about this. Even though my brother must have been angry about our family home being demolished without his consent, he said, I won't interfere, but I'll lend a hand. Do what you think is right, Deborah. Everyone condemned Howard's actions and supported me. A month passed without any payment for the damages or compensation. During that time, there was no contact from Howard. I couldn't keep relying on Julia's hospitality forever. I wanted to receive the money soon and at least establish a stable living situation. But contrary to my wishes, something unbelievable happened. It was revealed by a comment from Julia. "This apron looks a lot like Grandma's," she muttered while showing me her smartphone screen. I was shocked when I saw the screen. It was a product page on a flea market app. The item Julia thought resembled my mother's apron was a unique piece I had made for my mother. "What? This is Grandma's apron. I made it, so there's no mistake, really," Julia said and hurriedly checked other pages. The seller seemed to have registered recently, with no transactions or ratings yet. As I checked the content of the nearly 30 items listed, I was shocked to find that they all belonged to my mother. I immediately realized it must be Howard's doing. No one else but Howard, who had demolished the house, could have taken my mother's belongings. I called Howard right away. "What's this about the app, Howard?" Howard responded, sounding annoyed. Thinking he was playing dumb, I'd angrily confronted him. "Don't play dumb. You're selling Mom's belongings, aren't you? Cancel the listings right now." Howard sounded panicked as he replied, "What? No, it's not me. Who else would do such a thing? I'm coming over to get everything back." I hung up and immediately went to Howard's parents' house with Julia. Upon arriving at Howard's parents' house, I immediately called out to Howard. He came out to meet us at the entrance, where I confronted him. "I don't know anything about it," Howard said. "Dad, tell the truth." Julia, supporting me, also pressed Howard for answers. He was visibly flustered. While this was happening, Howard's parents, perhaps realizing we were there, showed up too. "Oh, Julia, you're here?" She smiled happily upon seeing Julia. Julia, clearly upset, spoke to her grandmother. "Tell Dad to tell the truth. The truth. It seems like Dad is selling the stuff Grandma passed away." With hearing this, my mother-in-law laughed. Howard looked troubled and kept repeating, "It's not me." Then my mother-in-law spoke loudly. "Howard's selling them? That can't be true. But because I'm the one selling them." I felt the blood drain from my face at her words. Howard must have known. He looked at his mother with a "this is bad" expression. Julia was stunned, but my mother-in-law seemed cheerful. "What did you say? It's quite a task, you know. Packaging has to be done carefully, and the photos need to be taken well." She talked about the app as if it was a fun hobby, not realizing she was selling stolen items. I struggled to contain my anger. "Cancel the listing. That's not something Grandma can just sell." Julia, red-faced and teary-eyed, appealed to her grandmother, but my mother-in-law seemed displeased. "What's the big deal? I found a fun hobby. I use what I can, and the rest makes a nice little income. It's good for preventing dementia after all. I'm the only grandma left. And Julia, you want me to stay healthy and live long, right?" My mother-in-law said this nonchalantly. It was clear she wouldn't listen to our pleas. But if talking won't work, we'll have to take action. "Let's go home, Julia." "But it's okay." I left the house, dragging Julia with me. And so, I rushed to the police station. I had not planned to file a report about the house being demolished, but theft was a different matter altogether. When I reported the theft and unauthorized sale of my mother's belongings to the police, they promptly took action. The flea market app company cooperated, and my mother-in-law's account was suspended. This ensured that no more items would be sold. On my way back from the police station, I called Howard. "I had your mother's account suspended. You knew about this, didn't you? You're complicit." "No, I've filed a police report. Please cooperate with the investigation." Howard became frantic at my words. "What? We're family, aren't we? Please withdraw it. Strangers, right? I still haven't received any compensation or damages for the house being demolished, and I see no remorse from you." I was angry, and Howard was at a loss for words. But I am not heartless. Despite everything, I had shared a life with Howard for a long time. Sighing, I realized that there might still be a long road ahead to resolve all these issues. I said I'll wait for the money, but I won't forgive the theft. Everything must be returned. And Howard, your father looked very ill. Has he been to the hospital? What? I'm not heartless, so I'm just letting you know. I said this and hung up the phone. I had seen my father-in-law earlier, and he hadn't spoken much. He was much thinner than when I last saw him a few months ago, and his face was pasty and unnaturally dark. It was clear that he was not in good health, but I doubted that the family had noticed. My mother-in-law was nonchalantly trying to sell stolen items, and Howard was only bold towards me. That parent and child simply lacked any sense of consideration for others. The next day, my father-in-law called me. I thought he might thank me, but it was the exact opposite. You're treating me like a sick person, planning to dump me in a hospital to get rid of me, huh? I have to protect Howard and your mother from you. I'm not going to any hospital, he scolded. I was concerned for him, yet this was how he responded. I apologize if it was out of line. I was just concerned, I'm not weak and short-lived like your parents. Don't patronize me. I was angry at his words, but a few days later, he apparently felt unwell and went to the hospital. The diagnosis was terminal cancer. Howard called me in a panic. Dad has terminal cancer. What should I do? I snorted. That's none of my concern. Remember what you said when I suggested the hospital. You said you're not weak and short-lived like my parents. Deal with it yourself. How can you be so heartless? Who's the heartless one? Did you ever say a kind word when my mother was sick? Reflect on your own actions. I said this and ended the call. As expected, my father-in-law passed away not long after. As a human being, I didn't want to harbor negative feelings towards someone who had passed, but recalling all that had been done and said, I couldn't shed a single tear. After the funeral, a will was found. Despite his claims of not being short-lived, my father-in-law had been thoroughly prepared. The house is to be inherited by my grandson Luke. The rest of my estate is to be divided between my wife and eldest son, it stated. I was surprised to see Luke's name. My father-in-law had always favored Luke, expressing a desire to live with him. Now he must have wanted Luke to live in the house even after his passing. For Luke, this was an unwelcome burden. Renounce the inheritance. You don't want that house, do you? I told Luke, but he was actually pleased to inherit the house. Inheriting the house would only mean paying inheritance taxes, with no real benefit for Luke. However, if he was happy with it, it wasn't my place to say anything. As per his grandfather's will, Luke inherited the house. My mother-in-law was delighted and paid the inheritance tax. He's our heir, after all, she said. Well, that wasn't wrong. I felt a bit down, feeling like Luke was taken from me. But then something unbelievable happened. Come to our house, responding to Howard's message, I immediately went to his parents' house. There, like me once stood, my mother-in-law and Howard, frozen in front of their house. On the property, there were heavy machines, trucks with the demolition company's name, and workers all demolishing the house. What's going on? It's my house. I can do whatever I want with it, right? Luke, who appeared out of nowhere, seemed pleased watching the house being demolished. Luke, what are you doing? Stop it right now. Even if I stop now, we can't live there anyway, Mom. Luke, what have you done? My mother-in-law and Howard pleaded with Luke, but he just laughed. Have you forgotten what Grandpa and Dad did to Mom, Luke? Grandma, you were horrible to Mom too, right? Did you apologize? Luke, his smile gone, glared sharply at his mother and Howard. They fell to their knees as the machines continued to loudly demolish the house. I felt relieved seeing the scene. Later, Howard, having finally received the inheritance, paid the compensation and damages. It seemed that Luke had recovered the stolen items my mother-in-law took from my mother, and they were safely returned to me. Mom, you've got me and Julia, Luke said, and I finally shed tears of relief. Howard and his mother lost their house and were left with no money, now living again in company housing. Howard and I had moved out of the company housing, and now Howard, along with his mother, had returned, becoming the talk of the town. A wife of Howard's colleague, with whom I am on good terms, contacted me, and I explained everything honestly. They'll likely live uncomfortably in the company housing now, but it's their own doing. Furthermore, with Howard's retirement, the two will need to save up for their future living arrangements. I might occasionally ask friends for updates on their situation, just for a story to share. I continued to stay at Julia's house, but Luke is now planning to get married and build a house. The land from his parents' house sold for a decent amount, surprisingly making the demolished house useful. "Mom, come live with us." Luke even invited me to live with them. His soon-to-be wife welcomed the idea warmly. I couldn't impose on Julia forever, so I gratefully accepted Luke's offer. I resolved to be a different kind of mother-in-law, hoping to live happily with my new family. Infertility treatment was out of the question, according to Jack. In his view, all I needed to focus on was managing the household chores for the family. I was taken aback by his unexpected statement, as it felt like he was reducing my role to that of a mere housekeeper. Day by day, I grappled with these feelings of frustration. One day, while cleaning Jack's room, I stumbled upon a childbirth DVD featuring a woman I didn't recognize. Bewildered, I questioned the identity of this mysterious woman. At that moment, Michael, a man unfamiliar to me, appeared. Desperate and unsure of what to do, I sought Michael's assistance in uncovering Jack's infidelity. With a plan in mind, I proposed holding the family's traditional New Year's Eve gathering in the annex where Jack and I lived. I carefully explained the situation to my in-laws, seeking their cooperation. Eventually, they agreed, and my journey of revenge against Jack began. I introduced myself as Maria, a 40-year-old housewife married for 3 years. I had married Jack, 3 years my senior, through a matchmaking arrangement. Although our family was well respected locally, Jack, the son of a wealthy family, had remained single until the age of 40. Initially, everything seemed promising. However, as time passed, Jack's demeanor changed. His once kind attitude turned indifferent, and he communicated with me mostly through assigning household chores. Perplexed, I approached my mother-in-law, expressing my concerns about Jack's behavior. Her response was dismissive, attributing Jack's behavior to a perceived embarrassment in talking to his wife, just like his father had been after marriage. While somewhat reassured, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. Jack's reluctance to discuss our lack of children became a growing concern. Despite my efforts to conceive, including monitoring my basal body temperature and maintaining a healthy lifestyle, there was no sign of pregnancy after 3 years. Worried, I mustered the courage to discuss fertility treatment with Jack, only to be met with his adamant refusal. Jack's shocking words, dismissing the idea of fertility treatment and insisting on my focus solely on household chores, left me pale and bewildered. I questioned whether he desired children, considering his family's expectations for an heir. Jack's vague assurance that it'll work out somehow left me perplexed and searching for answers. Somehow, I found myself puzzled by Jack's cryptic words, but he remained silent about how it'll work out somehow. The meaning behind his vague assurance would later unfold unexpectedly. Day after day, I grappled with frustration while tending to the never-ending cycle of household chores, convincing myself it was a natural part of being a daughter-in-law. Yet, a growing emptiness persisted. During my routine cleaning of Jack's study, surrounded by countless books, I discovered a large CD rack next to the bookshelf. To clean thoroughly, I had to remove all the items. In the process, I accidentally knocked down about 20 DVDs. Faced with the challenge of putting everything back in order, I noticed meticulous labeling on both the discs and their cases. One label caught my attention: November 30th, 2022, birth of Ethan. Trying to connect the dots with Jack's earlier words about an heir, I decided to play the DVD. In the living room, I inserted it into the DVD player and pressed play. The screen revealed a dimly lit room resembling a hospital examination table. with a woman in her early 20s, visibly pregnant, smiling at the camera. As the scene unfolded, the woman began experiencing labor pains, and Jack's voice could be heard soothing her. Shockingly, the pregnant woman repeatedly called him Jack. The video progressed to the childbirth process, with Jack excitedly encouraging the woman named Jessica. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized Jack had been cheating on me. The date on the label indicated it happened exactly a year ago, implying nearly 2 years of infidelity. Though the DVD hinted at Jack's betrayal, it didn't conclusively prove the child's parentage. Considering legal or investigative options, I was hindered by Jack's limited financial support for my living expenses. Lost in contemplation, the doorbell rang, and on the monitor, I saw a man in his late 20s, Michael. Curious about his purpose, I'd opened the door, and he introduced himself, asking if Jack was home. With a troubled expression, he handed me his business card, revealing his name as Michael. The name Michael sounded familiar, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had heard it before. When Michael revealed that he wanted to inquire about a woman named Jessica, one of Jack's subordinates, a sense of recognition hit me. Jessica was the same name as the pregnant woman from the DVD. Curiosity got the better of me as I asked Michael if this Jessica was the woman who gave birth about a year ago. To my question, Michael showed surprise, and I pressed for more information. His response left me in shock as he mentioned something about Jack acknowledging the child. Intrigued and wanting to unravel the truth, I invited Michael inside. Though I offered him tea, he declined and began explaining the complex situation. Michael disclosed that Jessica was his ex-girlfriend, and despite her being pregnant with Jack's child, the baby, Ethan, was actually his. This revelation left me bewildered, especially since Michael insisted on having proof. Contrary to the usual scenario where a cheating partner would be confronted, Michael's response seemed peculiar. He explained that Ethan resembled his baby photos, and he had attempted to reconcile with Jessica, only to be rejected due to financial instability. Michael asserted that Jessica, however, maintained that Ethan was Jack's son. The revelation explained Jack's secretive behavior regarding his income and the financial support he provided to Jessica. Feeling helpless, Michael had hired a private investigator, confirming Ethan's paternity. Overwhelmed by the gravity of the situation, Michael and I decided to join forces and confront Jack. As December arrived, I proposed to my in-laws to hold a New Year's Eve gathering at our annex. To gain their cooperation, I shared Michael's revelations gradually, avoiding sudden shocks. I showed them the incriminating DVD, and my in-laws, visibly shocked, agreed to support our plan. On New Year's Eve, our relatives gathered at our annex, and in the cramped living room, we set up a long table for the traditional meal. Before dinner, my father-in-law addressed everyone, expressing gratitude for their presence and mentioning the importance of what we were about to show. As he spoke, I stood up, urging everyone to watch the video, setting the stage for the revelation that awaited them. I said, "This," turned on the TV, and started preparing the DVD player. "What is it?" "Some interesting video," Jack asked me with a smirking expression, unaware of the fate that awaited him. As soon as I pressed play, Jack's face froze. Suddenly, the labor waiting room appeared, with Jessica lying down. "Is this—" "Hey, stop it, Maria." The relatives around us began to murmur in confusion. "What's this all about? Who's that pregnant woman?" All eyes turned to Jack, realizing the trouble. Jack frantically searched for the DVD player's remote. But anticipating this, I had hidden the remote. When Jack realized the remote was missing and approached the DVD player, my father-in-law held him back. "Stop, please, stop." Jack struggled to stop the playback, but my father-in-law and I firmly restrained him. "Jack, don't make it worse. Just watch quietly." Hearing his parents' words, Jack, almost in tears, fell silent. Meanwhile, the childbirth DVD continued playing. Is this Jack's secret child? Oh my, to think someone in our family has a mistress. If this gets out, we won't be able to show our faces around here. Amid the uproar, with some relatives crying, I addressed everyone to calm them down. Everyone, please calm down. This baby being born is not Jack's child, but Jack was there, right? The pregnant woman kept calling his name in pain. Everyone looked at me confused. Jack was the most shocked of all. Maria, how did you know that? Oh, so you knew it too, that he wasn't your child. When I pressed him, Jack covered his mouth with an awkward awe. Why did you acknowledge him if you knew he wasn't yours and you've been paying child support every month? Well, Jack, sweating on his forehead, was at a loss for words. Acknowledgement, child support, and yet he's not your child. Explain that properly. Yeah, we can't accept this as it is. Everyone was accusing Jack in unison. But Jack himself couldn't seem to spit out the truth. My mother-in-law, unable to hold back any longer, prostrated herself in front of everyone, crying. Everyone, I am so sorry. It was my fault for not raising him right. While sobbing, I rubbed her back with both hands. No, it's not your fault. I am going to call someone who will testify. Now that's right, I forgot. I'm sorry for losing my composure. My mother-in-law raised her tearful face, and Jack, sensing something was off, confronted me. What's going on? What are you all planning? Quiet, to Jack. This mess is your fault in the first place. Yes, even if the child isn't yours, the fact remains you cheated. The room fell silent at the in-laws' words. It was about time to make the call. I took out my phone and dialed someone. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang, and it was Michael, who had been waiting nearby. Behind Michael was Jessica, carrying Ethan. When I let them into the living room, the relatives started murmuring. Isn't that the pregnant woman from before? Yes, that's her. And this man, Michael, is the real father of the child. I introduced Michael to everyone as planned. Michael followed our plan perfectly, bringing Jessica with him. The plan was this. Michael went to Jessica and told her that Jack's family had found out about his secret child. He lied that Jack could no longer pay child support and was transferring custody to Michael. Believing this, Jessica would surely panic. So Michael said, I can't suddenly become a father, and suggested they come to our house to discuss child support. Normally, a mistress wouldn't come to the house, but Jessica seemed desperate for money, thinking Jack would help her. She came because Michael knew how Jessica would think. He brought her here as planned, and as expected, Jessica yelled at Jack on seeing him. What? You're not paying child support anymore, and even giving custody to this poor man is cruel. What? I didn't say any of that. I tricked you, Jessica. I said, this, turned on the TV, and started preparing the DVD player. What is it? Some interesting video. Jack asked me with a smirking expression, unaware of the fate that awaited him. As soon as I pressed play, Jack's face froze. Suddenly, the labor waiting room appeared, with Jessica lying down. Is this? Hey, stop it, Maria. The relatives around us began to murmur in confusion. What's this all about? Who's that pregnant woman? All eyes turned to Jack, realizing the trouble. Jack frantically searched for the DVD player's remote. But anticipating this, I had hidden the remote. When Jack realized the remote was missing and approached the DVD player, my father-in-law held him back. Stop, please, stop. Jack struggled to stop the playback, but my father-in-law and I firmly restrained him. Jack, don't make it worse. Just watch quietly. Hearing his parents' words, Jack, almost in tears, fell silent. Meanwhile, the childbirth DVD continued playing. Is this Jack's secret child? Oh my, to think someone in our family has a mistress. If this gets out, we won't be able to show our faces around here. Amid the uproar, with some relatives crying, I addressed everyone to calm them down. Everyone, please calm down. This baby being born is not Jack's child. But Jack was there, right? The pregnant woman kept calling his name in pain. Everyone looked at me confused. Jack was the most shocked of all. Maria, how did you know that? Oh, so you knew it too, that he wasn't your child. When I pressed him, Jack covered his mouth with an awkward awe. Why did you acknowledge him if you knew he wasn't yours, and you've been paying child support every month? I know Jack, sweating on his forehead, was at a loss for words. Acknowledgement, child support, and yet he's not your child. Explain that properly. Yeah, we can't accept this as it is. Everyone was accusing Jack in unison, but Jack himself couldn't seem to spit out the truth. My mother-in-law, unable to hold back any longer, prostrated herself in front of everyone, crying. Everyone, I am so sorry. It was my fault for not raising him right. While sobbing, I rubbed her back with both hands. No, it's not your fault. I am going to call someone who will testify. Now that's right, I forgot. I'm sorry for losing my composure. My mother-in-law raised her tearful face, and Jack, sensing something was off, confronted me. What's going on? What are you all planning? Quiet, Jack. This mess is your fault in the first place. Yes, even if the child isn't yours, the fact remains you cheated. The room fell silent at the in-laws' words. It was about time to make the call. I took out my phone and dialed someone. A few minutes later, the doorbell rang, and it was Michael, who had been waiting nearby. Behind Michael was Jessica, carrying Ethan. When I let them into the living room, the relatives started murmuring. Isn't that the pregnant woman from before? Yes, that's her. And this man, Michael, is the real father of the child. I introduced Michael to everyone as planned. Michael followed our plan perfectly, bringing Jessica with him. The plan was this. Michael went to Jessica and told her that Jack's family had found out about his secret child. He lied that Jack could no longer pay child support and was transferring custody to Michael. Believing this, Jessica would surely panic. So Michael said, I can't suddenly become a father, and suggested they come to our house to discuss child support. Normally, a mistress wouldn't come to the house, but Jessica seemed desperate for money, thinking Jack would help her. She came because Michael knew how Jessica would think. He brought her here as planned, and as expected, Jessica yelled at Jack on seeing him. What? You're not paying child support anymore? And even giving custody to this poor man is cruel. What? I didn't say any of that. I tricked you, Jessica. Why? I'm his mother. Why would you do that? Of course, you've been nothing but lies, chasing after men with money. How can anyone trust you? No, I won't lie anymore. Please let me stay with Ethan. Jessica looked at Michael pleadingly, but Michael's decision was unwavering. Ethan was even trying to look away from Jessica. She no longer had the right to be a mother. Jessica, there's something you need to say first. You had an affair with your boss, and now his wife and relatives are here. Shouldn't you apologize? Oh, well. Jessica was at a loss with the relatives watching. I seized the opportunity to confront her. Well, regardless of whose child it is, your affair with Jack is a fact. We'll be demanding proper compensation for that. No, I don't want to. What a shameless woman. Settle your dues properly. The relatives echoed the sentiment. And, of course, Jack, you'll be paying compensation too. I looked sternly at Jack. Then my father-in-law also spoke to Jack. Not just that. Having someone in our family causing such a scandal is a disgrace to us in the eyes of society. Therefore, Jack, you must leave our house. Yes, he's a disgrace to the family, right? Leave now. The relatives' accusations made Jack shrink, and then he looked at me with pleading eyes. Maria, I was wrong. I'll pay the compensation. Please help me. I was speechless at his pathetic state, but Jack, undeterred, continued. Wait, if I'm kicked out, you'll struggle too, right? So ask Dad to let me stay. He'll listen if you ask. No, that's not necessary. I'll also leave after divorcing you. I firmly responded, feeling relieved. I couldn't help but notice Jack's bewildered expression. What are you talking about? How will you live if you leave? A housewife, like you can't make it on her own. No, that's fine. Michael suddenly interjected, surprising Jack even more. Jack, didn't you know? Maria was the secretary to the president of my company before she got married. My dad still laments losing her. She was the best secretary he ever had. So after the divorce, she'll work for us again. Jack, who showed no interest in my job at the matchmaking meeting, had no idea. Michael never showed his face at the company when I was working there, so we didn't recognize each other. That's why when I first met Michael, his name sounded familiar, like I had heard it somewhere before. That's the situation, Jack, so please divorce me. Maria was such a good daughter-in-law, but I understand. Miyoshi's president is a good acquaintance of mine, so we'll likely keep in touch with Maria. Yes, I want to keep in touch with Maria too. Thank you. I hope to continue our relationship. Tears in my eyes, I clasped hands with my in-laws. Then Michael left with Ethan, and Jessica stayed behind for negotiations on compensation. The same was true for Jack. We couldn't just let him lead without discussing compensation and property division, which lasted until morning. As a result of the discussions, we split the marital assets, and Jack paid me compensation for his infidelity. And so Jack was disowned by his in-laws, having never lived outside his family's property. Jack struggled even with the moving arrangements. Furthermore, his workplace boss was acquainted with my former father-in-law. The rumor of his affair with Jessica, his subordinate, spread quickly. Needless to say, his colleagues' attitudes towards him changed for the worse. Jessica resigned early and returned to her parents' home. However, it turned out that her father, who also knew my former father-in-law, was furious about her affair with her boss and making another man acknowledge a child born from another relationship. He quickly kicked her out. Now, after paying me the compensation, Jessica is said to be working at a nightclub, her savings depleted. All this information came from my former father-in-law, with whom I still keep in contact. I was again amazed by the extent of his connections. Eventually, Jack too resigned from his job. After much personal turmoil, he has since gone somewhere to look for work, but I have no idea where. As for me, I was rehired by M Corporation and am working as the president's secretary. Michael is still at the subcontracting factory. He says he wants to stay at his familiar workplace, while Ethan is still a preschooler ready to rush over if anything happens. Truly, he's a great hands-on dad. I had wanted children myself, but now I'm so fulfilled with my job. I think I'm okay without getting married again. However, about a year later, after Ethan started attending daycare, Michael was set to join the parent company. At first, he would be a trainee. Then one day, to my surprise, Michael proposed to me. I was genuinely shocked by the suddenness. Really? There's quite an age gap between us. Are you sure? When I asked, Michael responded with a smile. I've decided ever since you got divorced. Ethan is attached to you, and besides, my dad says it has to be Maria. I know I'm younger, but please, will you marry me? Moved by Michael's sincerity, I was drawn to him, and so we got married. Now it's Michael, Ethan, and the new life growing inside me. A child from Michael and me. We're building a happy family together. I'm sorry, but we already departed while I was using the restroom at the rest area. During that time, I received a call from Luke, and I couldn't help but wonder what he wanted at such a moment. Upon answering, I overheard Luke and his in-laws laughing boisterously. When I inquired about the commotion, he shared something unbelievable. They were going to enjoy themselves with the family, and I could head back home to clean or do something productive. Anticipating this trip for a long time, I felt a mix of excitement and reservations about traveling with his family. Staying in a luxury inn was something I had looked forward to. However, the shock of being left alone at a rest area, inside the restroom stall, left me feeling deeply betrayed. Despite my anger, I lightly replied, "Okay, unforgivable." Today marked not only our wedding anniversary, but also my birthday, and we embarked on this trip. I decided that he would regret this. My name is Lucy Mitchell, a 33-year-old housewife without children, living with my husband Luke. We celebrated our one-year wedding anniversary on my birthday. Luke, with his romantic nature, always cherished our anniversaries and birthdays. He was raised in a wealthy family, and those childhood memories lingered, prompting him to celebrate special days in grand style. We met at a matchmaking agency, where men from affluent backgrounds like Luke were popular. Despite initial doubts, I approached him, and luckily, I seemed to be his type, leading to our marriage. Unbeknownst to me, after getting married, my life would take a turn for the worse. A year ago, Luke and I started our marital life in a 2-bedroom apartment in the city. Luke desired a larger house, but I disagreed, suggesting we live within our means. Despite his family's wealth, I felt guilty about our expensive $1,200 rent as a housewife. Luke assured me, "Don't worry. My dad will sort it out." As time passed, our marital life took a troubling turn. Luke's frequent visits to his parents' house, even for seemingly trivial reasons, left me feeling uneasy about our newly life. This unease grew when he casually mentioned having dinner with his parents on a regular evening without inviting me, his wife. The frequent absence and lack of inclusion in family events made me question the dynamics of our marriage. As I shared my concerns with a friend during a dinner, she expressed surprise at Luke's actions, stating, "He goes home that often and leaves you behind for a cousin's birthday. That's crazy." She had been married for 5 years, and she had more experience than me in married life. Realizing that her reaction was a common sentiment, I felt embarrassed. "You're right, it's weird. But according to Luke, it's normal." Seriously, don't take this the wrong way, but hasn't he really grown up yet? Maybe upon reflection, her comment struck a chord. It's unusual for a 35-year-old, even if he's set to take over his dad's business, to prioritize family affairs after getting married. I regretted not recognizing Luke's true nature before marrying him. Returning home after dinner with my friend, I felt down. "I'm home, Lucy. Where have you been? Isn't it normal for a wife to cook dinner and wait for her husband, Mrs. Mitchell?" To my surprise, my mother-in-law was in the living room. Luke was apparently out, perhaps at a convenience store. "Why are you here? Weren't you and Luke supposed to dine out tonight?" "That got canceled due to some issue at the restaurant." "I thought Luke had messaged you just a bit ago. Didn't you check?" She pointed it out, and I looked at my phone. Indeed, 10 minutes ago, Luke had messaged that he'd be home early, but that was just about when I got off the train. There's no way I could have gotten home and started dinner in such a short time. Yes, he did message, but I saw it just now. What the heck? This is the problem with kids from single-parent households. You can tell they weren't raised right. My mother-in-law's words stabbed me in the heart. Indeed, I was raised in a single mother's home. After my mom gave birth to me, my father passed away due to an illness. Despite that, my mother did her best to raise me lovingly. I wish she wouldn't say things that belittled my mother's hard work. It has nothing to do with being raised by a single parent. "I just hadn't seen the message yet," I retorted, clearly irritated, but she brushed off my comment and changed the subject. "Well, anyway, I've always noticed this, but your house is quite small." "I think it's average. It's suitable for just the two of us." "You can't be serious. I feel sorry for Luke, living in such a cramped space." My interactions with my mother-in-law continue to stress me out. Both my mother-in-law and father-in-law, perhaps because of their wealth, often seemed condescending. That's why I never got along with them. Realizing further conversation was futile, I silently started preparing dinner. Ignoring me, she went on and turned on the TV. From that day, she started dropping by unexpectedly more often. Even my father-in-law came along a couple of times. Mostly, they'd complain about how dirty the kitchen was or how cramped the house felt. Eventually, they'd sarcastically suggest, "You know, we have a bigger house. Why not move in?" I absolutely didn't want that. I firmly declined every time. They always visited when Luke wasn't home, so Luke didn't know about their snide remarks. I once talked to him about it, but his reply was, "Why not? Why is living together a bad idea?" I was dismayed when he too suggested moving in. From then on, I realized there was no point in discussing it with Luke, and I endured on my own. Soon, we'd be celebrating our first wedding anniversary, which also happened to be my birthday. "For your birthday this weekend, I'm thinking of celebrating more grandly than last year. After all, it's also our anniversary, Luke said as he came home tipsy from work. Seeing his flushed face, I couldn't be sure of his sincerity. Knowing his love for celebrations, I felt a hint of excitement. What? Last year, you treated me to a delicious dinner, which was more than enough. That's nothing compared to what I've planned. Let's go on a family trip. A family trip. The term sounded odd for just the two of us. Noticing my confusion, Luke continued. My parents, cousins, uncles, and all will join. We're heading to a luxury resort in Palm Springs. All those people, and why Palm Springs? Got a problem with a family trip? Or is it Palm Springs you're not keen on? No, it's not that. Honestly, I couldn't understand why my birthday and our anniversary would involve his family, who had nothing to do with either occasion. I couldn't grasp what Luke was thinking. I've always known he's a bit out of touch with the general populace, but I hadn't expected this level of disparity. While the choice of Palm Springs puzzled me a bit, it wasn't a major issue. Sounds fun, right, Lucy? Sometimes you've got to let loose and enjoy. Luke, in his intoxicated state, grabbed my shoulders, and I found myself nodding in agreement. For the next week, I couldn't get the trip out of my mind. At first, I was skeptical about going with his entire family. But as Luke said, it's a rare vacation, and I should make the most of it. During the trip preparations, I noticed my growing excitement, and a genuine smile crept onto my face. I knew my in-laws would probably make snide remarks as usual, but I vowed to ignore them completely. Finally, the awaited Saturday arrived. Luke and I headed to his parents' house, our meeting point for the trip. Well, Lucy, you're late, aren't you? Do you even realize you're the star today? Right in front of the assembled family, my mother-in-law was quick to throw shade, but it seemed she did realize that I was supposed to be the star, so it took the edge off her words a bit. I'm sorry, there was traffic, I replied. Excuses won't do. We should leave soon. Otherwise, we'll be late to our luxury resort. All right, let's get going. Despite their grumbling about our tardiness, it was tolerable. After all, they'd been making such remarks throughout the past year. Luke's cousin appeared much younger than him, looking to be in his early 20s, with a sinister look in his eyes. I began to wonder if everyone in this family was mean-spirited. My paranoia was somewhat justified when he made a belittling comment. This is Luke's wife. Not what I expected. I diverted my gaze from him, figuring that reacting would only invite more nitpicking. I decided to show a mature demeanor. I'm so excited. I've been to luxury resorts multiple times, but tonight's place costs $1,000 per person. Hearing the figure, $11,000, I was both shocked and had a sudden thought. No way could it be. I climbed into my in-laws' car. Once my father-in-law hit the gas, the car swiftly started moving. The journey from here to our Palm Springs destination would take about 2 hours. We decided to take a short break at the next rest stop. About an hour into our journey, I excused myself. I'll be right back, heading to the restroom. All right, off you go, my mother-in-law waved, as if shooing away a stray dog. I headed to the rest stop bathroom, feeling the weight of everyone's eyes on me, or was it just my imagination? Taking a deep breath inside the bathroom stall, I felt relieved that the trip had been relatively uneventful so far. I hoped the remainder of our journey would be equally smooth. Just as I was settling into that thought, my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was Luke's name on the display. Expecting him to ask me to pick something up, I casually answered the call. I'm still in the restroom, Luke. With what sounded like amusement, he replied, alongside the laughter of my mother-in-law, sorry, but we've already left. There was a moment of stunned silence on my end, and laughter echoed from their side. What do you mean? When I asked Luke, he replied, we're going to have fun with our family. You should just go home and clean, Lucy dear. Today's trip is just for the Mitchell family. It's a pity, but you'll have to stay behind. Goodbye. I was told the unbelievable. I had been looking forward to this trip for a long time. Having his family join us was a bit of a concern, but staying at a luxury hotel had me excited. And now, they left me alone at the rest area. I was trembling inside the restroom stall, feeling utterly betrayed. Trying to hide my anger, I responded with a light. Okay, this was unforgivable. Today was our wedding anniversary and my birthday, and they brought me on this trip. I'll make them regret this. After leaving the restroom, I called someone. The person on the other end was shocked and shared some astonishing news. I asked, "Really?" They responded, "Yes." Then the person on the phone promised to come pick me up. Left alone at the rest area like this was unbearable. Praying for a timely rescue, an hour later, my uncle came to pick me up in his car. "I'm so sorry to trouble you like this." "It's okay. It's quite an unfortunate situation." Yes, they're headed to a luxury hotel in Palm Springs. That means, my uncle tilted his head in thought, seeming to realize something. "I think that's the case," I replied. "I'm really sorry, but can you please take me there? I'll take the train back." "Got it. The drive there is nice anyway." Uncle gladly accepted my request to go to Palm Springs. About an hour later, we arrived. In Palm Springs, Luke and the others came here. In front of us was a luxurious inn with a grand gate. It was a well-known hotel, the only luxury accommodation I knew of that cost $1,000 a night. At the reception, I was told, "Dinner starts at 6:00 p.m. Please follow me." The person who greeted me with a smile was my mother. "Lucy, it's been a while." Dressed in an elegant outfit and smiling gracefully in a manner that could seem somewhat formal to others, it was undeniably my mother. Indeed, this inn has been run by my mother's family for many years, and she currently holds the position of the innkeeper. After becoming a single mother, she began working at this inn, so to me, this place feels like home. I had called my mother from the rest area and was surprised to hear that there was a reservation today from the group at Mitchell Securities. I had a suspicion when I heard they were going to a luxury hotel in Palm Springs, but I never imagined they would be coming to our very own inn. Of course, the family doesn't know that this inn is run by my mother. Still, what a terrible story, Lucy. You can't just let this slide. Yeah, I know. That's why I came here. I see. Why don't we get you changed over here? I prepared to greet them at the dinner table. An hour later, at 6:00 p.m., the in-law family gathered for dinner. I hid in the next room to remain unnoticed. I slightly opened the door to observe the inside. Ah, the spa was amazing. I'd want to come here every day if I could. If it were closer, we could indeed come every day. At the very least, if you become the CEO, we could afford to come here any time. Really looking forward to that. I mean, the subordinates handle all the work anyway. I want to become a CEO soon too. Luke and his family, thinking they were among themselves, were making some rather crude remarks. But when my mother appeared from the other side of the door and greeted them, the room went silent. "Today, I will be in charge of serving you. Please let me know if you need anything." Seeing my mother bow with perfect grace, there was a tangible tension amongst the family. However, when the food was served, they resumed their inappropriate discussions. For a while, both my mother and I did nothing, simply watching the plates empty before them. It's great that we all could come. We got rid of the bothersome daughter-in-law, and the food is delicious. Perfect. If you say that, she might get angry, you know. It's fine. She's not really one of us, to be frank. She never was. After all, it would be a shame to have a child from a single-parent family in our household. Hearing her mother-in-law's harsh words, my frustration boiled to an almost uncontrollable point. At that very moment, my mother entered the room with a dessert plate loaded with cake and fruit. Today, I've heard it's Miss Lucy's birthday and also her wedding anniversary with her husband. May I know where Miss Lucy is seated? In response to my mother's question about where to place the cake, the family looked at each other confused. Nobody told you that? Excuse me, I'm the innkeeper, and I've clearly heard about it. Did Luke call? What? I didn't tell anyone. There was an awkward silence in the room, and the in-laws exchanged glances. In the end, the mother-in-law raised her hand. I am Lucy. I was too embarrassed to mention it at this age, but thank you all for the surprise. Given that the only woman in the room was the mother-in-law, her reaction was appropriate. However, my mother gave a faint smile upon seeing her act. Hey, what's so funny? Is it strange to be surprised at my age? No, not at all. I wasn't thinking that. Then what? Just bring the cake already. Yes, but before that, there's something I'd like to share. The irate mother-in-law barked at her. My mother composed herself. I swallowed hard. Lucy Mitchell is my daughter. What? Everyone present made a dumbfounded expression and raised their voices in shock. Seeing an opportunity, I swiftly opened the door from the adjacent room and stood next to my mother. Welcome. This innkeeper is my mother. It's a pleasure to meet you, Luke exclaimed. Lucy, why are you here? And what do you mean she's your mother? It means exactly that. This inn belongs to my family. I'd also intend to take over this place someday. In truth, Luke had never met my mother before. While part of it was due to my mother being busy with the inn, Luke and his parents also insisted on not meeting her face to face. I had received a phone call from Luke for our wedding introduction, but he never met her in person. I showed my mother a picture of Luke and explained who he was. It was an unconventional introduction, but I believed my mother had accepted him. From your conversations earlier, could you please refrain from mocking and belittling my mother for being a single parent? That's right. What's with the sudden drama? What grudge do you have against us? Neither Luke nor his mother nor anyone else seemed to realize the extent of the disrespect they had shown me. Exasperated, I let out my anger that had been building up. Grudges? If I have any grudges, it starts with you, Luke. I thought you were a good person when we got married, but it turns out you're a mama's boy. You married me, so you should prioritize me above all else, right? Don't join forces with your parents to mock me. Faced with my undeniable logic, Luke was rendered speechless. My mother just listened quietly to my outburst and to my in-laws. Why do you treat me this way? If you find me such a nuisance, I can leave the Mitchell family right now. What? You'll become a lonely, poor single woman. Yeah, are you sure about being alone? Both the mother-in-law and Luke sneered. Looking back and forth between my mother and me, I stared back fiercely. It's okay. Actually, I'm pregnant, so I won't be lonely. And if I inherit this inn, I won't have any financial worries. The truth is, I found out I was pregnant last week, and I hadn't told Luke yet. Only my mother knew, which is why she wasn't surprised. A child? What are you talking about? I haven't heard about this. Wait, Lucy, if that's the case, it changes things. You should have told us sooner. Upon learning I was pregnant, the family immediately changed their tune. I couldn't stand their fickle and unreasonable behavior any longer and shouted again, No, my decision is final. Let's proceed with the divorce through lawyers. I will live happily with my child and my mother. Saying this, I'd opened the door to the hall they were in and left. The door slammed shut with a sharp noise. I'm done with this. My child will be happier without that family, whether trying to change my mind or not. I received over 30 calls a day from Luke and his parents. Eventually, I blocked all their numbers. A few days later, I received a letter from Luke informing me of our official divorce. The letter expressed his regret and pleaded for me to return, but I ignored it and tore it up. I thought he might neglect our child just like he prioritized his parents over me, and I absolutely didn't want that. Being alone and lonely would be your fate, not mine. I thought he should enjoy his bachelor life. Currently, I am nurturing my child in my womb and discussing future plans with my mother. Once the child is born and grows a bit, I plan to send them to daycare and join the inn's business. The path to becoming the next innkeeper is long, but to raise my child properly, I am determined to work hard. That's why I requested you to settle the debt. The burden my husband suddenly imposed on me, vanishing without a trace. No matter how persistently I tried to reach him, there was absolute silence. Now, I'm left wondering what to do, facing an insurmountable debt. Fortunately, in my moments of despair, there was someone by my side offering encouragement. My dear daughter. Mom, cheer up, echoed the soothing voice of my beloved daughter. My name is Kate, 35 years old, juggling part-time work and homemaking. My husband, Rogan, and I, along with our daughter, make up our family of 3. I met Rogan at a mixer, a casual event I attended just to fill the numbers. Despite my nervousness, Rogan took the initiative to strike up a conversation, effortlessly lightening the atmosphere. Before long, we connected and decided to exchange contact information. As our communication deepened, a special bond blossomed between us. Unexpectedly, we started dating, a twist I shared with my older sister Talia after our first date. To my surprise, Talia burst into laughter, commenting, "I never thought you'd choose a boyfriend from a mixer." She assumed I'd find someone through work. Talia, enjoying her single life, didn't seem eager for a relationship. Fast forward a few years and Rogan and I got married. Talia congratulated us on our new life together. Our early days of marriage were filled with joy. Rogan's proposal and our move to a new apartment marked the beginning of our life as a married couple. Although our different work hours meant we seldom returned home together, we cherished the time spent dining, sleeping, and enjoying our days off together. This routine brought a new joy to our lives, and a few months later, we were blessed with the birth of our adorable daughter, Rhea. The emotional impact of Rhea's birth was profound, and I felt like I had found true happiness. Our families showered us with congratulatory gifts, celebrating this new addition. I resigned from my job to dedicate myself fully to my family, and Rogan, always considerate, helped with housework and childcare. However, a few years later, regret began to seep into my heart. Rogan, after resigning from his job due to issues with a new superior, failed to communicate this significant decision to me beforehand. While I empathized with the challenges he faced at work, the abruptness of his resignation left me concerned, especially since our family relied on his income. The absence of any discussion or consultation added to my distress. "That was so sudden. Have you already thought about your next job?" I questioned him, grappling with the unforeseen turn of events. "Yeah, don't worry. I'll figure something out." Rogan's vague response failed to ease my concerns. However, it seemed the only option now was to trust him. Fortunately, Rogan quickly secured a new job, a relief for both of us. I also considered working, but since Rhea is still young, I want to be there for her at home. "Is everything okay at the new workplace? Have you settled in?" I inquired, attempting to gauge his well-being. "Yeah, somehow. Did something happen? Are you not getting along with your boss or colleagues?" I persisted. "I told you I'm fine. Don't worry too much. Look, I'll take care of Rhea, so you go and take a bath." "Really, thank you," he responded. Though he seemed different than usual, I refrained from prying further and handed Rhea to him before heading to the bath. A few days later, Rogan returned home looking dejected. As I tried to inquire about what had happened, memories of his abrupt resignation flashed through my mind. Did he quit his job again within such a short period? "I quit my job. I just couldn't get along with the people there. I couldn't stand being constantly directed by someone much younger than me. I just couldn't bear it anymore," he explained. "I see, but we'll get through this. We'll find another job. I'll help in any way I can." Suddenly, Rogan's expression changed, and he raised his voice at me. "Hey, what's with that look? You don't like that I quit? You're able to eat because I work. You just stay at home and you're acting all high and mighty." After throwing his bag onto the living room table, he continued, "Shut up. Just be quiet." Unable to contain his anger, Rogan grabbed a whiskey from the fridge and downed it in one gulp. I had never seen him this angry before. I felt terrified at that moment. Despite my gratitude towards him and efforts to be supportive, an extremely angry Rogan shouted at me for a while, then slumped down on the sofa looking grumpy. I was so shocked that all I could do was accept his words, and this incident created a rift in our relationship. Since then, Rogan has been caught in a cycle of finding and quitting jobs, leaving us in uncertainty with many anxious days. I couldn't keep silent any longer. "Rogan, can't you be a bit more serious about your job? If you have complaints, then you work and earn money." You rely too much on me, but there's Ria to consider. So, what's your point? Lately, Rogan has been gradually losing interest in Ria and seems to be avoiding her. When Ria was born, he took great care of her and was genuinely happy. Observing Rogan now, he felt like a completely different person. No matter how much I pleaded, Rogan showed no interest in continuing his work. Eventually, I decided to entrust Ria to Talia and started working on my own. I'm really sorry for having to leave her with you. I apologized to Talia. It's okay. Raya and I will wait together, she reassured me. Raya, who had just started attending kindergarten, wasn't a major concern. Part of it was because I trusted Talia to take care of her. But Ria was also remarkably mature and calm for her age. She showed interest in newspapers, read them on her own, and could even write long and somewhat complex sentences. Raya had a quiet disposition and was exceptionally composed for her age. When she started attending kindergarten, I was concerned about whether she'd be able to make friends and effectively communicate with others besides me. However, it turned out I didn't need to worry. Raya made many friends in kindergarten and enjoyed her time there. As a parent, that was the most heartwarming thing to witness, given the situation. I felt it would be no problem for me to work outside the home. When I started looking for a job, I found one quicker than expected, and I began working full-time. The pay was better than I had anticipated, and even if Rogan quit his job, our finances would probably stabilize. Thankfully, the work environment was also pleasant, and despite the busy days, I enjoyed working. A few years after I began working, Rogan finally found a stable job. It seemed like he had finally found a workplace that satisfied him. Learning this brought a profound sense of relief. Over time, Rogan's demeanor brightened, and he seemed to return to the man I knew in the early days of our marriage. He became considerate of the challenges I faced juggling work and family, often asking, "Has it been tough? Aren't you tired?" I was a bit taken aback by this transformation. Perhaps job stability had given Rogan peace of mind. Rhea was growing up healthily, and Rogan started acting like a caring father to her once again. Seeing Raya play joyfully with Rogan always warmed my heart. Still, the thought of returning to the way things were before made me anxious about leaving my job. Therefore, I continued to rely on Talia for childcare. "How's Rhea? Is she looking well?" I would ask Talia. "Don't worry, she's playing happily," she reassured me. If Rhea was doing well, I could be at ease. I probably would continue to depend on Talia. I had been considering treating Talia to something she liked as a token of my appreciation. Several years went by, and Rhea was now in the 3rd grade of elementary school. She attended school every day with great enthusiasm. The family's bond was just like before, harmonious and loving. I wondered what had caused the previous rift between Rogan and me. Our home life felt so stable, almost as if the past problems had been forgotten. Then, one day, Rogan made a suggestion. "Ever think about getting a new car?" I was taken aback. "A new car?" "Yeah, our current car is good, but I think it's reaching the end of its life. If it's becoming a hassle to maintain, indeed the car we were using had been purchased quite a while ago. Over the years, issues increased, and the repair costs started to pile up. You might be right. Maybe we should consider a new car. Yes, I knew you'd agree. By the way, I've already got some catalogs pulled ready." "Thanks." I didn't expect him to be this eager about replacing the car. I was a bit surprised, but we started looking through the catalogs together. "Rhea, come here. Which car do you want to ride in? Let's decide together." He called Rhea over, and the 3 of us enjoyed flipping through the car catalogs together. However, I couldn't have imagined that this day would mark the beginning of an unexpected turn of events. A few months later, the new car that the 3 of us chose was delivered. The car we bought was a brand new model costing over $155,000. The loan was under my name. Generally, people would expect Rogan's name on the loan, but considering his unstable work history, we were concerned about being rejected. I was determined to work even harder from now on and pay off the loan. I was sure Rogan felt the same way. That's what I believed. But my hopes were shattered in an instant. Rogan stopped coming home. He disappeared along with the newly purchased car. Could it be that Rogan got involved in some kind of trouble? What should I do? At that moment, my cell phone rang. The call was from Rogan. "Hello, Rogan. Where are you? What are you doing?" Out of concern, my voice raised unintentionally. "Hey, calm down. But you disappeared all of a sudden, and the new car is gone. What happened? Did you get caught up in some trouble?" I tried to convey how I had worried every day until then, but Rogan laughed at my concerns and said something unbelievable. "Actually, I found a new lover. She's more important to me than you." "What? What do you mean? Let me be clear. I've fallen in love with someone else. I've already taken care of the divorce notice. I'd appreciate it if you stopped getting involved." "Wait, divorce? I can't believe this." I was shocked by the mention of a divorce notice. However, I remembered a discussion we had during a big fight a while ago. Submitting the application to the court means that both parties agree to the divorce. I deeply regretted letting my emotions take control at that time. "Oh, by the way, I have a debt. I'm counting on you to repay it." "What? How much debt are we talking about?" "I think $200,000, give or take. I'm leaving all the repayments to you." With those words, Rogan abruptly hung up the phone. I never thought something like this would happen to me. Were all of his kind smiles in the past just lies? As these thoughts crossed my mind, I could feel the strength drain from my body. "Mom, what happened?" As I slumped to the floor, Raya rushed over, looking concerned. "It's okay, honey. Thank you." I tried to put on a brave face, but inside, I was filled with anxiety. How will I manage our life now with such a massive debt looming over us? The thought of the $200,000 made me feel suffocated. On top of that, there was still the car loan to think about. In a state of panic, I decided to check my bank balance, searching everywhere. Closet, drawers, kitchen, bedroom. But my ATM card was nowhere to be found. Frantically, I launched my bank app on my smartphone. And to my horror, the account balance had significantly decreased. I had no memory of withdrawing such an amount, and the only suspect was Rogan. Trying to contact him proved futile, and with my mind going blank, I thought I should focus on earning money. I chose to keep this a secret from Talia and young Riev to avoid unnecessary worry. A few weeks after Rogan disappeared, I lost consciousness at work. Upon waking up, I found myself in a hospital bed, where Talia and Ria revealed they knew about Rogan and my deteriorating health. Raya had overheard Rogan's phone call, and Talia, surprisingly furious, wanted to locate Rogan to make him repay the debt and medical bills. However, Rogan's whereabouts remained unknown. When I was discharged, I fell down, fearing Talia's reprimand for letting her know. Various tests revealed my poor health was due to cancer, still in the early stages with hope for recovery through surgery. Though the surgery went well, returning to work immediately seemed impossible due to mounting medical bills and no savings. During these challenging times, Talia and Ria became my pillars of support. Talia tried to locate Rogan, and when she discovered he was working in the same building, they hatched a plan to get back the car that was under my name. As we prepared to confront Rogan, Talia stopped me, emphasizing the need for a solid plan. Raya reassured me that everything was set up, and a month later, while at Talia's house, a sudden call from Rogan came in. After ignoring it initially, I gathered my courage and answered. In a frantic voice, Rogan pleaded for help, claiming he was about to be arrested. He shared his location and quickly ended the call. Talia and Ria then revealed the turn of events. They had reported the car as stolen, a move aimed at compelling Rogan to confront the consequences. Filled with gratitude, Ria blushed, and the mystery of their plan became clear. I expressed my gratitude to Talia and Ria and hurried to the park where Rogan was waiting. The specified park was surprisingly close to my home, and when we arrived, we found police officers interrogating Rogan about something. After explaining the situation to the officers and having them leave, Rogan ushered us into his car and began narrating the events that led to this. Inside the car, a confident-looking woman named Lily sat boldly in the passenger seat, staring at us with a cold gaze. Rogan questioned why the police came to him, seemingly unaware of the gravity of the situation. Raya confronted Rogan, asking why he left them behind and why he wouldn't pay back the money himself. Rogan, visibly shaken, remained silent. Rhea and Talia continued questioning Rogan about his actions and his relationship with Lily. Talia criticized Rogan's irresponsible behavior, constantly changing jobs, and quick temper. Rogan bowed his head in silence, and Lily, visibly irritated, revealed shocking details. Rogan had borrowed $200,000 in his wife's name for expensive luxury gifts for Lily. Raya questioned Lily about her pregnancy, and Talia noticed an inconsistency in the timeline. Lily revealed that the child wasn't Rogan's and admitted to keeping it a secret to avoid further involvement with him. The tension increased, and Talia took charge, threatening to call the police for the criminal acts committed. Ignoring Rogan and Lily's pleas, Talia instructed me to contact the police. Legal actions were taken, and Rogan and Lily faced consequences, including compensation payments, repaying the debt, and child support. Despite attempts to reduce payments through lawyers, a secret recording made by Rhea served as evidence denying their requests. In the end, Rogan and Lily didn't go to prison but had to shoulder responsibilities. Rhea and I now live with Talia, and the car was safely returned. Rogan is somehow managing the debt, and the presence of Talia and Rhea played a significant role in resolving the situation. Grateful for their support, I look forward to a peaceful life with the two of them, working hard for a better future. Divorce papers had been duly filed, and when it came to dividing the property, I made the decision to claim the house. Despite my insistence, Ben dismissed any notion that he could contest it. Uttering those final words, he abruptly left the hospital room, indifferent to my pleas for him to wait and my desire for a meaningful conversation. That was how I found myself discarded, even in the midst of battling a serious illness like cancer. Loneliness enveloped me, but strangely, the negative emotions that once lingered in my heart began to dissipate. It was as if my love for Ben had evaporated. At that moment, I acknowledged that Ben, who had insulted me and consistently acted selfishly, deserved some form of retribution. I began calmly strategizing my revenge. My name is Wendy Morgan, a 50-year-old housewife living with my husband Ben. Our marriage, devoid of children, had spanned 30 years. Initially, I believed we were a supportive couple, but an irreparable rift had developed between us. In my understanding of marriage, partners should support, challenge, and complement each other. However, this was absent in our relationship. Returning from an errand, I found Ben demanding dinner immediately, oblivious to the continuous responsibilities of a housewife. Even on his days off, he prioritized his own leisure over supporting me. Over the years, Ben never extended a helping hand, regardless of how busy or unwell I was. His perception of a housewife's role seemed limited to constant labor, and he never allowed me to rest, even during illness. I had hoped for a marriage built on mutual support, but Ben's actions contradicted that ideal. The early days saw me attempting to bridge the gap, but Ben remained resolute, asserting his belief that as a housewife, I had no grounds to complain. Love had long faded, and I didn't anticipate unwavering support in everything. Still, I longed for simple kindness during challenging days. Ben's refusal to acknowledge my humanity and hardships widened the rift between us, turning our marriage joyless and meaningless. I grasped the situation more acutely than anyone else. It was during this realization that I sensed something awry with my health. While I had always been prone to illness, this time felt distinctly different. I promptly reached out to my father, who escorted me to the hospital, where I received the diagnosis of cancer. Fortunately, it was detected early, and the doctor assured me that I could commence treatment immediately. Eager to begin the healing process, I implored my father to bring only the essentials from home. Hastily, I navigated through the hospital admission procedures. Unable to meet Ben that day due to his work commitments, I conveyed the disquieting news to him through a brief message. I informed him, "Cancer has been found, and I'm being hospitalized for treatment immediately." In these moments of anxiety about the uncertain future, Ben's image crept into my thoughts. Despite my belief that my love for him had waned, a latent desire to face him properly and continue our life together as a couple lingered deep within my heart. Even though Ben had consistently been aloof and indifferent, I envisioned a scenario where, now that I was weakened, he might express concern and ask, "Are you okay?" I yearned for some warm words and would have been content with just one visit. I wondered if he struggled with meals and household chores in my absence. I felt remorse for not being able to fulfill the household duties I had always taken for granted. However, as days passed in the hospital, Ben never visited. He had read my message, and yet there was no expression of concern, not even a simple reply acknowledging the situation. His apparent indifference despite my serious illness shook me to the core, causing profound pain. Realizing the futility of my expectations, I decided to stop anticipating anything from Ben. With this newfound mindset, I faced the grueling battle against the illness. The treatment was as demanding as expected, marked by enduring pain and suffering. The medication's side effects took a toll on my body, leading to many sleepless nights filled with discomfort. There were moments when I contemplated giving up on treatment, allowing my deteriorating body to take its course and end my life. However, each time I felt this way, the encouraging words from my parents, reassuring me that I was doing great and things would surely get better, compelled me to summon strength and endure until today. Then, on a day when I was particularly unwell, lying in bed and staring blankly at the ceiling, the door to my room unexpectedly swung open. It wasn't the day for my parents to visit, and I couldn't help but wonder who had entered. The identity of the visitor became clear as I shifted my gaze and saw Ben standing there. Had he finally come to visit me, genuinely concerned about my condition? As he looked at my emaciated face with hollow cheeks, a whirlwind of emotions left me speechless. Would he come to dislike me even more? Without displaying any concern for my state, Ben sat on a chair next to the bed, stared at me, and laughed. "So this is how bad one can look with cancer, huh? You don't even look like a woman anymore." His words made me feel as if the blood had drained from my face. These were words that should never be said to someone fighting cancer. I didn't want him to say anything more, but unaware of my feelings, Ben continued with even more hurtful words. "Ever since you've been hospitalized and not at home, every day has been like heaven. The house is a mess, but I don't even have to go back there. Life is so comfortable without you." His heartless words reopened my wounds. Why must I be subjected to such cruel words? Why is there not a single word of concern from him? Although I wanted to vehemently criticize Ben, my weakened body couldn't move as I wished, and all I could do was silently accept his brutal words. I looked at Ben with a vacant gaze, and noticing my stare, he laughed condescendingly. Then, suddenly saying, "Oh yeah, by the way," he uttered unbelievable words. "Oh yeah, by the way, I've already filed the divorce papers. I'll be taking the house. As for the property division, you hardly have any right to refuse." The moment I heard those words, my vision blurred and twisted. Did he file the divorce papers without even consulting me? Why? As I was at a loss for words, Ben continued to speak. "I've really fallen for someone. She's 20 years younger, but I'm serious about her. I plan to be with her, so you're in the way." The realization that he was having an affair raced through my mind. However, then, having said what he wanted to, began preparing to leave. Wait a minute. Even as I said that, Ben paid no attention. There was clearly no love left for me in his heart. The realization was so painful that it didn't matter anymore. "I see. Understood." I said this, and Ben left the hospital room with a pleased laugh. After that, I endured my treatment with even more determination than before. Despite the hardships, I focused my will, resolved to completely cure my cancer and regain my health. 2 days passed like this. It might sound short, but for me, unable to sleep properly at night, those 2 days felt very long. I wondered if the divorce Ben mentioned really happened, or if he had said it just to unnerve me. The uncertainty was unbearable, but somehow I managed to continue my treatment. In fact, I had a trump card to completely bring down Ben. Even Ben, who seemed almost inhuman, would be thrown into chaos once he realized it. If panicked, he would surely try to contact me in some way. While waiting with this thought, Ben's call came in. Thinking it improper to answer in the hospital room, I pretended not to notice. But Ben persistently kept calling, even on silent mode. The continuous calls were too annoying. I'm in the hospital room, and it's inconvenient to have my phone ringing, so please don't call. After sending this message, the calls finally stopped. But then came texts like, "Please let me talk to you just once. Please, I was wrong about everything. I'll apologize properly." Apparently, he had resorted to messaging since I wasn't answering his calls. All of his words seemed like self-defense. Probably, Ben realized why I accepted the divorce so easily. "Can I come over there now?" Faced with my silence, Ben seemed to have reached his limit and sent that message. Honestly, facing Ben now amidst my grueling battle with illness felt like nothing but pain. But if I refused, he would probably keep calling. So I replied, "Do as you like." My revenge was about to begin. Ben, who had unjustly treated me for so long and divorced without consent, deserved a severe punishment that would make him despise his life. I had been eagerly anticipating the moment when I could bring him down to the depths of despair. "Hey, what the hell is this all about?" Ben entered the room with a shout, his tone suggesting a palpable sense of panic. To an outsider, it might seem like he was overreacting, but given the circumstances, it was natural for Ben to be agitated. After all, I had been concealing an incredibly important secret, and the critical moment had arrived. "I had no idea that you had assets worth $10 million. Why didn't you tell me how much you had?" Ben spoke, placing my passbook on the desk, clearly displaying a deposit of over $10 million. I never mentioned it because you never asked. How could I imagine a housewife like you having so much money? If I knew you had this much, I wouldn't have divorced. That's not my problem. It's Ben's fault for divorcing me without proper confirmation. Stop with the pointless excuses. Despite his domineering behavior and divorcing me without my consent, Ben couldn't stop his selfish remarks upon discovering my assets. "Why didn't you tell me? I wouldn't have divorced you if I knew." I decided to reveal the truth to the selfish Ben. The truth is, I accumulated this fortune of over $10 million through investments. I started to fill my spare time, and it was my parents who suggested, "Why don't you try investing?" Our family life was comfortable even on Ben's salary alone, but I wanted to contribute to our finances in some way. My father, knowledgeable about investments, immediately taught me diligently when I expressed interest. Thanks to his guidance, I started with the hope of making even a small profit and continued investing steadily. I made my first investment 5 years ago, and since then, I rapidly improved, becoming capable of earning significant amounts of money through investments. Even my father was astonished, saying, "I never expected you to grow this much." The profits I generated over these 5 years are the $10 million recorded in the passbook Ben brought. Actually, I was planning to tell you when the timing was right, but then I got cancer. You divorced me without listening to anything I had to say. I never intended to keep this wealth a secret forever. Once I overcame my battle with cancer and could return to my normal life, I planned to tell Ben about this $10 million. I had originally intended to share it with him, envisioning that we could continue our life as a couple and use it when necessary. However, Ben selfishly chose to divorce before I could reveal this financial secret. Now that we're strangers, it feels odd to disclose it to him. Given this outcome, the entire $10 million probably belongs to me. As I recounted my story, Ben's face flushed, and he began shouting, "If I knew you had this much money, I wouldn't have divorced you. It's your fault for keeping it a secret. So pay me $10 million in the property division. You need to atone for the sin of keeping secrets from your husband. Whether he was panicking over the reality of such a vast fortune or frustrated that he couldn't get his hands on it, Ben started saying the unthinkable. Since we were already divorced, no matter what, it was impossible to give him this $10 million. Still, Ben, seeing but unable to reach the $1 million right before him, started making unrealistic demands. In response, I unintentionally laughed. Ben yelled at me. "What are you laughing at? Stop belittling me." "I've always been annoyed by your attitude. I never thought you'd be so cunning to have such a fortune as a wife. A wife's assets belong to her husband. You have to give me this $10 million. I never intended to keep this secret forever. I was planning to tell you. But you divorced me first. Stop making excuses. It's all your fault for keeping secrets." Without any recollection of making excuses, Ben became more enraged with each word I spoke, blaming and berating me. His shouting was too much for my head, still recovering from illness, and I couldn't bear it. Realizing it was futile to continue talking with Ben, who wouldn't accept my words and would surely try to make me the villain, I quickly ended it. "Enough is enough. You divorced me of your own accord, right? Who filed the divorce papers without my consent? I always thought your behavior was terrible, but I never imagined you could be so cruel. To think a person could feel this much frustration." Now my heart was filled not with the pain of battling cancer, but with resentment towards Ben. He should have realized that shouting this loudly would affect my weakened body. More than that, I couldn't suppress my anger towards this selfish person who sat arrogantly beside my bed, accusing me with words born from his self-centered thoughts. Do you know what I thought when I found out I had cancer? I thought that answering him might make Ben worry about me a little, be kinder to me, and reconsider his feelings. Instead, he didn't even come to visit me in the hospital. When he finally showed up, he told me he had filed for divorce without my consent and that he would take the house. How could he be so selfish and then come here criticizing me for having substantial assets? I've said it many times, I never intended to keep it a secret forever. I was planning to find the right time to tell you. You destroyed that chance with your own hands. I had never blamed Ben this much before. I had always forgiven his selfish behavior, thinking we were a couple who should support each other. I never scolded or reprimanded him, always enduring for his sake. But the reason I could endure and keep going was that I had love for Ben. I truly loved him. But now, I don't have any love left for him. All I feel is uncontrollable anger and disbelief towards Ben, who only speaks selfishly. How can someone be so self-centered? What kind of upbringing leads to such a lack of empathy? After all, a person who indulges in an affair and divorces without consent can't possibly have serious thoughts. I was too stunned to speak, realizing it was futile to harbor any doubts. "Please, my girlfriend found out you have $10 million and says she'll divorce me if I don't get it from you. If I don't get this money, I'll be all alone. You still love me, right? Don't you want to help the person you love?" So Ben's mistress also knows about my $10 million fortune. He must have carelessly told her. From Ben's story, it seems his mistress is also quite obsessed with money. Birds of a feather flock together, I guess. As much as Ben and his mistress seem to be a match, I couldn't care less about him. No matter how much suffering comes his way, it has nothing to do with me anymore. Please, I'll do anything. Just give me the $10 million, otherwise I'll suffer. Please help me. I had never seen Ben so desperate, and his expression seemed so ridiculous that I couldn't help but laugh. At the same time, I felt disappointed and miserable, realizing he had never been this desperate about anything related to me. The more we talked, the colder my feelings for Ben became. I realized that talking to him anymore was pointless. No more dealing with this rotten man could possibly lead to my happiness. I felt foolish for suffering and hoping during my illness that he might come and speak kindly to me one day. Oblivious to my feelings, Ben continued to plead. "Please, I'm begging you. Help me. But I couldn't bear to hear his words any longer. "Please leave now," I said. Then started to plead with a look of desperation. Even that was noisy and unpleasant to me. I pressed the nurse call button, explained the situation, and asked the nurse to get rid of Ben. A security guard came and forcibly removed him from the room. "Please listen to me. I need you," he shouted until the moment he was thrown out. But I no longer accepted any of his words. Afterwards, he visited the hospital many times, but the nurses, knowing the situation, never let him near my room again. According to a friend, Ben, unable to get the $10 million, disappointed his mistress and was promptly divorced. Now left alone, as for me, I continued to confront my cancer with determination and finally recovered and was discharged. The relief of overcoming my difficult battle with cancer and the newfound energy I felt were more precious than anything. Now I'm living a peaceful and relaxed life, gradually using the assets I grew through investments. I'm Christine, a 41-year-old homemaker. My husband, Mark, and I first crossed paths at work, eventually tying the knot after 5 years. Our joy was complete with the arrival of our son, Jake, now an adorable 5-year-old. While I'd love to spend every moment with him, our financial constraints necessitate my working and leaving Jake at a daycare center. Jake, being understanding, often makes simple requests, like wanting an omelet tomorrow. His innocence makes it easy to comply, although I secretly suspect it's because my culinary skills don't extend far beyond basic dishes. Despite my excuses, I can't deny the challenge of crafting a perfect omelet. The early years with Jake were blissful, with our family outings and weekend drives creating cherished memories. However, things started changing when Jake turned 3. Mark, once elated by Jake's presence, began coming home late, citing frustration with Jake's occasional fussiness as the reason. Mark's late arrivals became more frequent, often extending into the early morning hours. His excuses seemed flimsy, and the scent of sweet perfume on his suit raised suspicions. Though bothered, I chose to ignore it, prioritizing Mark's role as a decent father when Jake was at his best. Fast forward 2 years, and Jake has grown into a lively 5-year-old. His vitality contrasts sharply with Mark's deteriorating attitude. Mark's impatience surfaces even for trivial matters, like a spilled cup of tea. Attempts to address Jake's behavior result in Mark snapping and refusing to engage with him. Conversations with Mark have become strained. His dismissive attitude toward family time and insistence on eating out instead of my cooking add to the tension. Suggestions for outings on his days off are met with resistance as Mark prioritizes rest over quality time together. It's disheartening to witness Mark's persistent irritability, seemingly stuck in a perpetual fussy face. Despite my attempts to bridge the communication gap, our exchanges have devolved into arguments, leaving me to wonder if Mark will ever outgrow this phase at 40 years old. I once confronted him about his perpetual anger, asking why he was always so furious. As expected, he responded with his usual ire, claiming, "It's because you're useless, obviously. You're passing that on to Jake. I wish he turned out more like me." It was a hurtful statement, insinuating that all of Jake's positive traits were inherited from him, while any negative qualities came from me. I found it hard to believe his audacity. My frustration with Mark escalated, with his words and actions causing me considerable emotional pain. Thoughts of divorce crossed my mind, as he seemed one step away from ending our marriage due to his behavior and lack of respect for our family. Despite it all, I stayed, holding on to the love I still had for my husband. Even though Jake was scared of Mark, he clung to a semblance of affection for his father. Living with a husband who was perpetually in a bad mood wore me down, but I lacked the courage to break up our family. Then, one day, Mark brought up the topic of a trip with some colleagues from work. These colleagues were the ones he was close to, the ones reveling in their single lives. He casually informed me of his decision to join them on the trip. I questioned the rationale behind his sudden desire for a getaway. Mark expressed his frustration, claiming he had been patient for too long, sacrificing all his time for the family. According to him, I spent all the money he earned on useless luxuries. I retorted that I was not indulging in luxuries and, in fact, contributed more to our family than he did. The harder I worked, the more money I made, but Mark seemed to put less and less into our family. His trip, financed by our shared resources, infuriated me. He declared, "I'm going away for a week from tomorrow, whether you like it or not. Don't complain." I was taken aback by the abruptness of his decision and felt my anger simmering. Before I could respond, Jake, who was supposed to be asleep, woke up. Panicked, I rushed to attend to him, apologizing for the disturbance. As I tried to put Jake back to sleep, I sensed something was wrong. His body felt hot, and he complained of a headache. In an instant, his eyes rolled up, and he collapsed. Frantically, I called for an ambulance. Mark, who I assumed would accompany us, refused to come along. Despite my frustration, I had no choice but to board the ambulance alone. Thankfully, the test results indicated a non-serious illness, but Jake was admitted for further tests. I called Mark to provide updates, balancing the urgency of the situation with the need to keep him informed. "What do you want?" I could sense his extreme annoyance, but with no time to worry about it, I quickly explained the situation and urgently asked him to bring a change of clothes for Jake's hospital stay. "Are you joking?" was his incredulous response. "I can't make it. I don't want to be late for tomorrow's trip, so I'm staying at my colleague's tonight." "Are you serious? Your son is in the hospital, and you're still going on a trip?" I exclaimed, hoping for some understanding. "Of course I am. She doesn't need me there for a simple checkup. Jake is suffering from a high fever, so there's nothing I can do," he callously replied. "Yes, there is. I asked you to." Before I could finish, he abruptly hung up. I tried calling again, but it went straight to voicemail. Frustration and anger surged through me. I didn't have his colleague's phone number to reach out for assistance. In the end, I called my parents and sought their help, feeling betrayed by Mark's callous abandonment of his son in the hospital. 2 strikes against him, and I could sense the 3rd strike looming. 3 days later, Jake's tests were over, and he was back to his usual energetic self. The results showed no problems, and he would be discharged from the hospital the next day. Planning to buy some pudding for him, I picked up my phone to check messages, and that's when it happened. It vibrated with an incoming call from a former colleague, Cindy. "Christine, where are you?" Cindy's voice sounded panicked. "I'm at the hospital." "Never mind that. It's an emergency," I replied, thinking it was related to Jake. "Apparently, your husband died in an accident." I couldn't comprehend her words. "What? This is a joke, right?" But her voice on the other end persisted. In a panic, I ran out. The shocking fact that my husband had passed away was hard to grasp. My colleague continued with more unsettling details. Mark was on a trip alone with a woman, and she had driven into oncoming traffic, colliding with a tree. There had to be a misunderstanding. Mark was supposed to be with his male colleagues. The thought that he could have been killed in a car accident with a woman seemed impossible. In a frenzy, I called my parents and urgently asked them to look after Jake, feeling overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events. In a state of panic, I rushed to the hospital where my husband was admitted. Amid my frantic thoughts, I couldn't help but wonder why they had called the company before reaching out to me. Nevertheless, it seemed like the situation was not a fabrication, so I hastened to verify the details. According to my former colleague, the men who were supposed to be with my husband were safe. Unsurprisingly, they were not together. Mark hadn't even bothered briefing them about his fabricated alibi. He was with another woman. 3 strikes. 3 strikes. And it seemed Mark's actions had caught up with him. Doubts lingered about whether he had actually died, and I needed to confirm the truth. As I entered the hospital room, a rattle echoed. To my surprise, there was only one person in the room, undoubtedly Mark. Bandages wrapped around his hands and feet looked painful, but the rise and fall of his chest indicated he was breathing. Cindy's information about his demise was incorrect. Mark was alive. "You're alive," I murmured, moving closer. Examining his slightly open eyes, He seemed a bit shaken. Maybe he hadn't anticipated the company contacting me so promptly. In his usual grumpy tone, Mark spat out, "Took you long enough. Your husband's been in an accident, and it takes you ages to get here. You useless piece off." "Well, good to see he's still his usual self," I interjected, noting his battered appearance. It appeared he had only broken his left hand and right leg, despite the wrecked rental car. "I'm glad you're okay," I told him, to which he replied, "You better take good care of me, huh?" He seemed remarkably fine. As I handed him a sheet of paper, I explained, "When I say I'm glad you're okay, I'm talking about your right hand. If you had broken your right hand, you wouldn't be able to hold a pen to sign this." Perplexed, Mark unfolded the paper, and I revealed divorce papers. "Yes, I was preparing it, which is why I got here late. I know you're injured, so I'll just leave it here. Make sure you sign it." "Are you joking? Why would I sign this?" Mark protested. "Wow, you told your girlfriend you were getting a divorce, didn't you? The reason you came home late every night was because you were with her. Was this trip a prenuptial trip too? Good for you. Now you can marry your sweet Michelle." "How do you even know her name?" Mark questioned. "Because I spoke to her, obviously. In fact, before coming to your hospital room, I stopped by the woman's room. She was also in the same hospital. I asked for the woman who was in a car accident and immediately found her. Despite her injuries, she seemed better off than you. Her parents were in the hospital room too. I asked her to tell me everything," I explained, recounting my encounter with the woman. With her parents questioning her, she glared at me and said, "Let him go. I don't know what she sees in you. You're cold to your wife and kids. You don't pay your bills. You go out every night. And you don't care when your kid is in the hospital. The cheating. It's game over." Mark's face instantly turned pale at her damning words. I anticipated his defensive reaction, but it didn't alter my decision. No, she's just for fun, you know. You're the only one I love. Just stop here," Mark pleaded as I filled out the divorce form. Unperturbed, I suggested, "Even if you tear it up, I've got plenty of space. In fact, why don't I just call a lawyer for alimony and child support? It might be better." A sudden change came over Mark as he shriveled up and stuttered, "I don't want a divorce." "Why not?" I took a deep breath, preparing to say what needed to be said. "Because," I began, "you can spend your money as you like, play around with young women, have children to take care of you, and enjoy life while I do all the dirty housework. A wife at home for security and a girlfriend for fun. What a great life. But if you divorce me, that all disappears." Mark's mouth hung open, and he seemed to lose his voice. I continued, "Wasn't it your perfect life plan? Now it's ruined. You can make a new life plan with Michelle, or whoever you like, but my son and I will not be part of it. Just pretend you died and have a new life." After saying everything I wanted to, I turned to leave the hospital room. Mark pleaded, wait, in a pathetic voice, but I kept walking. In the coming days, I initiated divorce proceedings and hired a lawyer. The discussions included Michelle, who was discharged from the hospital. When Mark claimed he had no intention of divorcing me, Michelle became furious, resulting in a heated argument. Mark resisted signing the papers, claiming I had ruined his life. Despite their conflicts, the divorce became official, and I received almost all the alimony payment I sought. After the discussions, my lawyer and I left the room, leaving Mark and Michelle still arguing. I wondered about the fate of their relationship, but my apathy prevailed. I told them, "I hope you have a lovely life together," before leaving the room, possibly being petty. Despite everything, Jake and I had returned to a peaceful life, free from Mark's mood swings. Regret lingered about not divorcing earlier, realizing Mark's attitude had caused my son pain. Living with just the two of us, I understood that we were perfectly fine without Mark. In fact, every day became a joy. Despite this, I acknowledged Mark as Jake's father, allowing him access if he wanted to see him. Surprisingly, Jake showed no interest. After the divorce, I sent Mark an email confirming alimony and child support payments. His reply was laughable. He recounted his misfortune, stressed from gossip at work, mistakes leading to job loss, and his parents cutting him off. I replied, suggesting he seek help from Michelle. Mark claimed they broke up, and he continued to send desperate messages. I eventually blocked him. As I placed my phone on the table, sipping tea, Jake approached, asking, "What should we do on our day off tomorrow, Mommy?" After a moment's thought, I suggested, "How about we grab some lunch and go to the aquarium?" Jake's face lit up with joy, expressing excitement about the dolphin show. Witnessing his enthusiasm, I couldn't help but smile, feeling content with our peaceful and happy life.